Oh,
There, now I'm recording.
yes, look at that.
And you know what, Danny? I can put people into breakout rooms now. I see that option if we want to do that.
Oh, you know, this is, no, not right now. So this is day 2. So we're going to go over the Washington Administrative Codes. And so to ensure that you're looking at the proper codes, there are several different sets of these out there. The most current one is this one that's 110145, and then it has 4 numbers that follow that. I believe I sent you the administrative codes in one of the emails I sent you. So like I said, I kind of carry this book around as my Bible. In past jobs, I was a foster care licensor, and I also overseen other programs. And so I'm very familiar with the administrative codes. And so that's why I feel like there's 63 pages. We're not going to go over all 63 pages. And so in this document that I'm about to pull up, it has, there's only 35 pages because I've taken random pages that don't have anything on it that we're going to cover. I've deleted them pages so that we can kind of get through it fast, and it's not me scanning through 10 pages really quick and making you guys dizzy while I try to find the next passage. So I've highlighted the things that we're going to go over in these WACs, but I would encourage you guys all to read them. It talks about case manager qualifications and what it takes to be a case manager. It talks about what are the expectations or the requirements for a staff member. It talks about, to become youth counselors like you guys. It talks about, what's required as the executive director, like how to become licensed and those sorts of things. So a lot of that is we're just going to scan over, but it is good information for you guys to know. The ones that I highlighted, I think are the most beneficial for you guys to have right now, walking in the door and understanding. Because once you sit down with Gabe and start to go over the rules and expectations, some of the rules and stuff come from the WAC. So if a kid says, well, how come we can't, how come there's not, video cameras in here? I want to know who stole my game out of my room. There's a WAC that says we can't have cameras in the milieu, so that you guys have kind of a base of information to understand why we do stuff. This also explains like why we do fire drills and those sorts of things, and requires staff to have, what training staff are required to have. So that's all the stuff that's in this book. So we can go over these. And like I said, I would encourage you to print them out. This is, oops, of course. Oh, maybe I need to go. Oops. No. I don't know why I have all these things open on my desktop. Let's see what happened. Now, that's not where how did it go to pharmacology? I have managed to, what did I do, Whitney? Oh, there it is. Okay. So.
Oh, there you go.
But I don't know what happened to the other WAC, why it went all the way to medication. So this is what can I close all of these or put them on top of the page? Oh, there we go.
The only thing we see now is your PowerPoint.
Oh, good. So so if the pictures are down, you don't see the pictures?
No.
Are they on there now?
No.
Because the recording has all of this. That's what I didn't like about the recording.
Oh.
So it has these windows over here.
I see.
So, but maybe your Elise knows how to get that out of there. Mm-hmm. So this is what, so we're licensed by the Division of Licensing Resources, and these are called the MLRs. So it's the minimum licensing requirements.
We can't see it, Danny.
Oh, you can't see it now?
Drag it on top of the PowerPoint application.
Hold on. So wait. So drag this one on top of here. No. Let's see. What did I do last time?
I guess maybe stop sharing that screen and then switch it to the other screen. Okay. That seemed to be what worked before.
See, that's why we're on here together, because we would just be so.
Stop. Just click escape. Maybe that is better.
Stop sharing that one and then share this one.
You can share your screen, but I'm going to share first. Yeah.
So you see the minimum licensing requirements now?
No.
Share your screen.
Oh, that's right. He's like, you got to share the screen again. But I don't know how to share the screen again. Let's see.
It's on the bottom.
No, but when I open up the licensing resources, it's not there. So let's see. What happened to the Zoom? I don't even see this. Oh, no, it's right here. Can you guys see that one? You see pharmacology?
No.
See, Whitney, this is why you were supposed to have control over this. So you could guess where I was supposed to be at and just, keep
Right.
share the screen and let's see.
There you go. You got it.
So you guys can see the minimum license requirements now?
Yep, you got it.
So this is we're licensed, the programs are licensed by the Department Division of Licensing Resources. And so these are the MLRs for group care facilities. So what I have to preface about this book, it is not only licensed, it doesn't only give the requirements for a group home, which is what Shelter and Hope Center and CASA and Pathways are licensed for. It gives information about maternity group homes, CRCs, overnight youth shelters, which we are not licensed as. We are licensed as a group home. So you'll also see information in here about, well, maybe not in this one, but in the full document, you'll see information about all those other bed types of facilities. You don't have to worry about, so when it says maternity group homes on top, requirements for maternity group home, you don't have to read those because those don't apply to us. There's a first section of this book, that will apply to all. So about staff qualifications and those are the same for all sorts of licensed facilities. And then there are some that are very specific to group care. And so if it says, maternity group homes or for staff residential homes, we're not a staff residential home. So any of that sort of stuff you guys can bypass. You don't have to read it. You can if you want to. It could be interesting information if you're looking at going into some other sort of facility to work. But for this, for youth care's requirements, we're just licensed as a group care facility. And so does that make sense? Ooh, Lord. And this is, where'd it go? Hold on, I'm trying to go back to the page. See, this is what I didn't want to do. So, and if you see down at the bottom, it says effective July 1st, 2018. That's how you make sure that you have the correct version of this. They have, this same one with the same picture has been, has been updated over the years, and they still use the same picture. So you have to make sure that you're looking at the WACs or the minimum licensing requirements for that are effective July 1st, 2018. Okay. So I was going on. So, okay. So the first thing, so this is just a table of contents, and then we're looking at, so licensing requirements for group care facilities. This is the Washington Administrative Code. So if I say WAC, it stands for Washington Administrative Codes. And then all the forms and stuff at the program, if they're associated with the WAC, should have this WAC on there. I'm not saying they've all been updated. I've tried to update as many as I can, but I'm sure that you might see a form out there that says 388-145. That form really needs to be updated. So with the current WAC code. But so the WAC codes you should be seeing are the 110145 WAC codes, and then it'll have 4 other numbers that follow, and I can show you that. So this is for the purpose of definitions in this book. So at the beginning of this of the manual, it has just all the definitions or the acronyms, and what, when it talks about group care, it gives you a definition of what group care. When it talks about group home, it gives you a definition of group home. So if you have a question about something, or you're not clear if it's what it's referring to, you can come to this front definition for purpose and definitions, and then we'll kind of explain what is meant by different sorts of words that they use on this. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of this page. Nope, not that way. I didn't. That's too many pages. Okay. So go down to the bottom, and then I have to go over here. And so the first thing we're going to look at, and like I said, I cut pages out of here, so this is not the whole manual. And I'm sorry, I don't want to make you guys dizzy. But I couldn't figure out how to just cut sections and and have them all in one page. So the first part I have here that's highlighted, and so we're just going to go over the highlighted ones. So group care, that's what we're licensed as. So our programs are considered group care programs. So we're operated on a 24-hour basis. We provide safe and healthy living environments for youth and meet their developmental needs. So that's what the definition of group care is. A group home is just a specific license. So we're licensed as a group home. And if you look underneath it, that's not highlighted, like a group receiving center, that's a totally different type of license. We only need to look to see what applies to group care and group homes in this manual, okay? So let's, so how long is the license valid for? So when we get licensed, we're licensed for 3 years. And it's only valid for the person and the organization that has applied for the license. So I couldn't, sell this program to Kirkland's Friends of Youth and they use our same license. They would have to go through the whole licensing process and become licensed. So at the 3-year period, it will mean that all of the staff that are hired, so if you've been here for 3 years, so right now, it'll probably be 2 years. If you guys are here for 2 years, no, for Hope Center, we're going through the relicensing process now. So 3 years from now, you guys would have to do like your background checks over again, and they would come in and check all the trainings and do a walkthrough of the program and stuff. So that is what, that's how long our license is valid for. So every time, I've been through licensing 3 or 4 times. Actually, I've probably been through 6 times because I ran a couple other programs. And all the programs have different license expiration dates. So Whitney's expires, she has 2 programs. Are yours licensed at the same time now, Whitney, or do they have 2 separate licensing dates?
It's 2 separate licensing dates.
Yeah. So every program will have a different date that their license expires. So the license should be hanging in a visual place in some place in the program. Most of them are hanging in the office, but it should be posted in the program somewhere. Okay, so the thing I like about this version of the WACs is that, hold on, make sure I didn't, oh, look, see, I knew I did that, is that everything is asked by, it's a question. So how long is my license valid? This for 3 years. And shoot, this can't just be easy. So in the next one that we're gonna go over is what children may I serve in my group home? So our kids that says at least 6 years of age, we don't serve anybody in any of our adolescent services program under the age of 12. So 12 is the youngest youth we'll take, even though if you see some Acasa kids, they look really small sometimes. And so they look like they're like 7 or 8. But they look, the document we have says that they're at least 12.
That's true.
So we want to make sure that we have children, are accepting people that have behaviors that cannot be safely or effectively managed in foster care. So we do get kids from foster care. Need temporary placement, awaiting more long-term placement, more permanent placement. Need a short-term placement during the time of a disruption. Have emotional, physical, or mental disabilities. Need a transitional living setting. So we might house them and then they transition to like a TLP program, which is called a transitional living program, is the TLPs. So sometimes, we have a foster family that needs to go out of town for whatever, they have a death in the family and they can't afford to take their, foster youth with them. They might need respite for a period of time, or the youth is doing something at home that isn't acceptable and the family wants them removed temporarily. So we can provide respite as a licensed provider. And then if they're over the age of 16, we are 16 and over, should be doing independent living skills for the youth that are in our programs. So how does the department decide which children? So we are licensed for a specific number of youth. Shelter is licensed for 12. Hope Center is licensed for 14. Pathways is licensed for 9. Casa Uno is licensed for 8, and Casa Dos is licensed for 14. Whitney?
12.
Oh, 12. Oh, so yeah, so they have 20 beds. Yeah, so they're licensed. So they have the Casa Uno and Casa Dos. They're same programs, one just serves male, one serves females, or at some points when they're low census, they kind of combine. But they can serve a maximum of 20 kids between the 2 programs. And the licensing DLR might make our census lower if we are serving like a higher needs group of kids. So kids that are in BRS, which is Behavior Rehabilitation Services, which are the highest level of needs for kids in Washington State, which is BRS. Those kids, like their ratio is 1 to 4 or 1 to 3, whereas our ratio is 1 to 8 because we supposedly don't take kids with those same sort of behaviors, even though we do see those kids. So do I have to admit and retain all clients? So, we have the right to refuse a child or retain a child in the program. So, that's how we transition kids between contracts. Like we'll move them from one contract to another if needed. just to kind of extend their bed. Or if there's a kid that they're referring to us, like I think I was talking during the staff meeting today, that we had a kid that was a sex offender, or they were trying to refer a sex offender, we have the right to say no. And so we get to make that decision. And sometimes the decision will vary just based on the kids we have in the program currently, you know? So, I mean, if we have a whole bunch of high need kids in the program right now, we probably want to take some kids with a little bit less needs, because known less needs. I mean, we take some random kids that you won't know what their needs are. But in general, if we can, we try to kind of match the milieu as much as possible to ensure that we are able to provide a safe, a healthy and safe environment for all the kids. Let's see. Sorry, I had this page down thing that I thought was going to work. Okay. So what are the general ratios of staff to children under our care? So this is, so for a case manager, we have to have one case manager for every 25 children that are in our services. Let's see if the page down thing will work this time. Oh, nope, I think I missed something. Sorry, guys. Oh, no. Yeah, so so the question is, what are the general ratios of staff and children under care? And then so we must have one backup or on-call person available at all times to report to the facility as soon as possible, but no later than 30 minutes. And I chuckle at that. So on the walls at most of the programs, at most of the under 18 programs, you'll see, like, it'll say, like, it'll have the supervisor's name, the program manager's name, and the director's name. And so if, and we also have an on-call system. So you would know who was on call. And if something happens in the program and somebody needs to respond, you would just, you know, either you'll have the email that says who's on call, you contact that person, and then they are the people that respond. I laugh about this because, you know, pre-COVID times, I could not get to, you know, sometimes you can't get from West Seattle to U Village in 30 minutes. So trying to get from, you know, like the North End or the South End to the program in 30 minutes is not realistic when we have, you know, I-5 traffic that is normal or has been normal for, you know, 20, 30 years. So, so we try to, you know, we try to have somebody that's close as possible to respond. Somebody will respond. It should be within 30 minutes, but it's not always within 30 minutes. I personally live in Tacoma, and I mean, I will get in my car and leave immediately, but even on the best day and no traffic, it takes me at least 45 minutes to get there. But Aaron and Emma, who are the directors, or a couple of directors in the organization, they live right in the Seattle area, so they can make it there a little quicker. So there should always be somebody on call that you can call that can respond or can give you information or support. You know, responding is really the last option if we don't need to. So what pre-service trainings are required for staff? So prior to having unsupervised contact with staff, you know, you have to have CPR, first aid, bloodborne pathogens, and those are all, you know, those are all provisions of this WAC. And then other things that we would provide for you, other trainings we'd provide for you are child abuse and neglect identification, which is the mandated reporting one you seen yesterday. We did incident reporting, access to community resources, client confidentiality. I know some of this stuff we will go over later in paperwork and those sorts of things. So family dynamics, intervention techniques. So all of this stuff isn't required for your pre-service. This is just stuff that can, you know, that it usually includes. So, and if you don't get it initially, it's something that we're working on providing, you know, offering trainings throughout the year so that people can continue to grow and learn. And, you know, I mean, we can't teach you everything in the next 2 days and expect you to go, you know, utilize it. So these are all of the trainings that at some point during this process, whether it be an in-house training with staff at a staff meeting or something that you sign up and you go to a training, you know, with a consultant or another agency, would be all be trainings that we would want you to have, you know, through, you know, probably within the first year and a half or so of, if not sooner, of working at youth care. So behavior management, crisis intervention techniques, like Whitney was saying yesterday, her and I provide that training. And so it might be another online training. We haven't figured that out yet because I haven't looked at it yet. But we need to have one set up because it is a requirement for staff to have behavior management and crisis intervention training prior to working, you know, unsupervised or by yourself, which would mean like even somebody running to the grocery store and leaving you in the program by yourself. So we do have a waiver for that right now, just COVID response waiver. But I mean, in general, we try to make sure that you have those tools in case you need them and you happen to be by yourself. We also like to have staff to have conflict resolution, substance abuse, sexually aggressive youth, and physically aggressive youth training. And also a lot of these trainings are offered by DSHS. They'll send out webinars. We can find those webinars and resend them to the staff if they would like. I mean, because even if you have a slow shift or, you know, the kids are on outing and you're waiting for somebody to come home, like you can take some of these trainings even while you're sitting in the staff office waiting for something to happen or those sorts of things. Effects of trauma on children is another training, youth supervision requirements, first aid and emergency planning. And then new staff and volunteers must work with a fully trained staff until the staff and or volunteer have completed all the required training. So just know that. So that's why we're trying to get some of this stuff out of the way before you go into the program. And then that's why it's imperative for you guys to have the other trainings, the ones I emailed to you, and do those as soon as possible. And a lot of it should be possible in the next 2 weeks because we have so many staff that we're onboarding. And so there will be a lot more people in the program right now than has been in the past, 2 months or so. So you guys should have time to be able to go through some of those. Did we, let's see. So then there's, what is the in-service training requirements for staff? So, so staff that are at Shelter, Pathways, and Hope Center are required to have 24 hours annually of ongoing training. So this first year, you'll probably get a whole bunch of hours, have like 45, 60 hours of training over the 12-month period. The following years after that, you have to have at least 24 hours. So the best thing to do is there's always emails sent out about trainings and stuff that are offered either through, like I said, through Youth Care or other organizations that would include any of these things: crisis intervention techniques, response restraint training, which is the one Whitney and I do, behavior management techniques, substance abuse. A lot of these are other ones, just like the ones I had up on the first one: suicide prevention, assessment and intervention, family intervention techniques, Indian child welfare and working with Native American children, cultural diversity, mental health issues and interventions, mediation skills, conflict management, problem solving, child abuse and neglect, characteristics and management of sexually aggressive and or otherwise predatory behaviors and physically assaultive behaviors, emergency procedures, HIV and bloodborne pathogens, HIV, AIDS and bloodborne pathogens, and fire and safety and emergency planning. So these are all things that over the next, during your time at Youth Care, the next year and a half or whatever, are things that are trainings that should be offered, or whether it's through us or somebody else, you should get emails and stuff, or they happen at staff meetings, letting you know that these trainings are occurring and that you can attend. And so it's easy to get your 24 hours this first year. It's after the first year of hire that you have to really keep track of. And then your training of behavior management, which is our right response training that Whitney discussed yesterday. So hopefully we'll have one of those in the next couple weeks. So what are the requirements for CPR training? So every staff that's working a shift should have CPR and first aid. Normally it's a hands-on training. Right now they sent out a link for a web-based class. And then once the COVID thing is over, we'll be able to have staff go and do like the hands-on portion and just demonstrate that you can do like the physical compressions and those sorts of things.
So, I wanted to add, Danny, that CPR Seattle is still doing in-person classes.
Okay.
What we've been letting our staff do is if they feel comfortable to attend the in-person, then we schedule that for them. But if they prefer to wait, obviously, until COVID is over and do the online one in the meantime, then they can do that. But at CPR Seattle, they've reduced the class sizes. So they're still able to practice social distancing while they're in the classroom. So that could be a good option if people feel comfortable.
Okay. And so if you guys would prefer to do the hands-on one, if you guys have never done CPR, I mean, I would recommend the hands-on one. I mean, if you had CPR and first aid before, the online class is actually really intensive, and I actually had to go, even though I was a trainer for CPR for a while, CPR and first aid, there was on this web-based version I was trying to take, I actually had to redo a scenario over again because I couldn't figure out I think it was technologically, I couldn't figure out how to make it work. But if you don't follow the exact steps that they want you to on the computer, then they make you take it over again. So there was a section I had to take over again because I failed the first time. So it was actually more intensive than I thought it was going to be. So, but there is that option. If you would like to go to CPR Seattle, which is right up the hill off of 45th in Seattle, it's up towards, what's that, like going towards Aurora. It's up there. So if you would like to attend that, just send me an email and I can set that training up for you so that you guys can attend. And if there's like 5 or 6 of us, we might even be able to get a class scheduled, specifically for youth care, just for staff to go up there and do the training. So just let me know. HIV and AIDS and bloodborne pathogen training is required, and that's the one of the trainings I sent out to you the other day. It's a web-based thing. It used to be 4 hours. Now it's only 2 hours. It's been approved by DLR, and that's why we currently use that one. So, and if any of I don't think I said this, if any of the trainings and stuff that you guys take cost money, or to get like your food handler's card or whatever, if you can turn those receipts into us, then we can get reimbursed you for those trainings. If we schedule the training, we like with CPR Seattle, they have a way to bill us. So you just go up there and say, hey, I'm blah, blah, blah with youth care. And then, you go to attend the class and then they just bill youth care directly. So what are the requirements for information kept in shift logs for group care facilities? So so Whitney's going to go over logs with you guys later after we do the medication training. And so these are just specific things that the licensor and WAC requires us to have. So if a youth has a serious health or safety issue, we need to make sure that that's written in the log. Any dates and illnesses or accidents while in care need to be documented in the log. Any medication and treatment given. So, I mean, we don't put like, we gave Danny Prozac. We might put, client, whatever their initials are, took, evening meds. We don't say specifically what it is. We have a med binder that actually tracks all the medication that is given to the youth. So when we give a youth a med, we just document it in the log that that client was given their medication, not specifically, how many pills or any of that stuff. So the log is just, kind of keep track of kind of what's going on from day, from moment to moment, and knowing where people are. So
Danny, I have a question.
Yes.
This section, it's referring to just the logbook and not the progress notes. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, this is just shift logs. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. So, and then also you put names of staff or volunteers who are directly responsible have direct care responsibility during that shift. So, I mean, if we have a volunteer who's coming in and painting a bedroom, we would probably put in the log that they were in the program, just so we know who's in the program during that time frame. But they wouldn't, even though they wouldn't be directly interacting with the youth. But I mean, we just want to know, like, at this time, these are the people who were here. In case there's a report of something happening at that time, we need to know that these things were said, happened, and this person was here. These staff were here along with this other person. So that's why it's important to put, as much information, kind of in short, like one-liner statements in the log, which Whitney will go over with you later on. So you must also have phone numbers, and I was talking about this for the after-hours supervisor. Like I said, that's hung in all the programs. An email is sent out by a majority of the programs about who's on call for different programs. So do you send that to your staff as well, Whitney, when you send out like who's on call, you send it to your staff? Because I know you send it to my staff.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So so there's an email to refer to who's on call, or at shelter we have a calendar, and you just look on the calendar, and Hope Center, you look at the calendar to see who's on call. So in addition, you must keep the following information current at all times. So incident logs. So this is back to the incident reports that we were talking about yesterday, including copies of any suspected child abuse. So that's what we write into our incident report. So we keep all that stuff tracked in our incident logs. Any identified child-specific supervision needs. So if the child is, needs to be in line of sight at all times, or has some suicide ideation, you'd want to make sure that that was in the log, and making sure that it was documented so people knew, like who they're supposed to be keeping a closer eye on, and those sorts of things. In this, we also will it'll also be written on the wall, but like if a youth is allergic to something, we might put that in here as well, like client, which we usually do CX, is allergic to, CX stands for client, and then their initials, and then what they're allergic to. But like I said, that's also written on a visual board in the office. Daily or shift logs. So these are also things you must keep current at all times. So daily and shift logs, written documentation of staff briefings, and those are we do that in the log, and then also this is where we also include that information in the progress notes. We call them progs, they're progress notes, which just talks about kind of what the kid did that day. And so somebody will go over those with you. I think Whitney goes over those with you later this afternoon. And then also there's weekly inspections and stuff that you guys don't have to be responsible for, but if you guys notice like a window is open and the alarm's not going off, or a door is broken, or certain devices aren't latching, those are things to let the program supervisor know as soon as possible, so that we can kind of get those things rectified. But the weekly inspection is supposed to take care of a lot of those things, but something could happen between this Friday and next Friday when the next inspections due. So if something happens, just let us know as soon as possible, so we can work on having the maintenance people get it fixed. Or if it's something that you yourself can fix, like a light bulb or something, you can feel free to do that. But I mean, if it's out of your scope of work, just let us know and we'll make sure somebody takes care of it. What are the requirements for children's records? Any identifying and personal information about a child and the child's family must be kept confidential. So I know that there was a question about confidentiality yesterday. So the records must be kept in a separate place, inaccessible to other clients and unauthorized staff. So I mean, if I have a staff that's at the program that is not working with the youth, they don't have the right to look at that file unless we can figure out a specific reason, like, oh, well, I'm going to work with them and their families, then they would need to see it. Somebody just wanting to look at the file because they want to look at it doesn't necessarily have the right to that file. And so during a child's placement, the records file must be kept in the secured at the site. So we have like the case manager's office, where we keep old files, for past clients. That are in a file cabinet in the locked office. And then at the programs, we have like current files are generally in a locked closet in the office, so that youth can't access them and those sorts of things. We want to make sure that no unauthorized person or another client, has access to somebody else's information. So, when kids are in the office making calls and stuff, you want to make sure you have those things closed as much as possible so that clients can't see other people's information. So during a child's placement, the record must be kept on site. Your facility must attempt to obtain, the following information. So, I mean, this is generally information that we catch during the intake process. Some of it we'll get during the screening process, such as the child's name, date of birth, legal status, phone numbers of their DSHS worker. And so something else I need to say about the WACs is they are written from the perspective of all kids being in foster care. So what I usually do is, if it says for our RHY youth, our homeless and runaway youth, from the RHY is the funding, so it's a runaway and homeless youth grant. For those youth, they might not have a social worker. So where it says social worker, I often would substitute that for the guardian. So if we need the social worker's phone number, the DSHS worker's phone number, that would mean that we would also need the parent or guardian's phone number. So, all kids in our care won't have a social worker. So. Written consent for medical care. So we have the family sign when they come in and do their consent paperwork. They have the family sign a release for us to be able to take them and get them surgery or get them medical treatment. It says that we can approve surgery as well if the parent is not around, but oftentimes the hospitals will still call the parent and try to get verbal consent from the parent before they do like an appendicitis or something, unless it's, life-threatening, something that needs to happen now without consent. Names, address, and telephone number of people authorized to take people out of the facility, copies of current legal authority to place. So this is once again, like, we don't ask, for a parent to, prove that that's their child. We kind of take people on their word. But for state youth, we want to make sure that they legally have the authority to place. So like we were talking about today at the staff meeting, the voluntary placement agreement would meet that need. Or when the social worker comes out and drops off a youth, they will also drop off the paperwork that says that they have the legal authority to place the youth with us. So those are just things to look out for. And it should include a current case plan and a social summary. If it doesn't, Sarah will also do a social summary. She's the case manager. So, and then we need to make sure that they include, treatment that's provided by staff with the signature making of who's making the entry in the progress notes. So we used to have to hand sign every entry that we put into a child's file. We no longer have to do that. We can, as long as you type your name in there, it's fine. You don't have to sign every sheet of paper or every one of your entries, because I used to spend hours and hours going through booklets signing those. So, so we no longer have to actually physical sign. Our typed in signature is good enough. We want to make sure that we have information about related or suspected child abuse and neglect referrals made to children's administration, including the concerns, dates, and person taking the report. So if we call CPS, we just want to make sure that we document all the information that we called and that this was a report that was made, so that in the event that a youth says, well, I reported this to youth care and they didn't do anything, you know, if they go back and look, they can see that we at youth care did make a report on this day at this time, and this is the person who took the report. Intake procedures completed, including an assessment of the youth's likelihood to stay in your facility, needs to be done. So these things are usually done during intake, which is usually done within the first 8 hours of a youth coming into the program, unless it's late at night. So date and time of orientation needs to be written on the form. So we have forms that staff will go over. Sarah will go over the child file layout with you guys later on this afternoon. A log and written report that identifies all incidents, physical restraints for a child. So another thing to know, we do teach the right response training, and it does teach certain physical interventions, but youth care is a hands-off organization. We don't do physical interventions. And so I'm working to get that clarified a little bit, just because, I mean, that's kind of ambiguous, because there's all kinds of things that you might have to do so that the child doesn't hurt themselves or somebody else that would constitute, you know, a physical intervention. But we don't do any sort of like floor holds, wall holds, seated holds, any of that sort of stuff. We don't escort kids anywhere. I mean, we physically go with them somewhere, but we don't put our hands on them to move the clients. So that's just something to be aware of. Any incidents involving, any incident reports involving youth, and a copy of a discharge summary. So this is also something that Sarah does, is a discharge summary. So when every client leaves care, whether it be Hope Center or shelter, at the one of the last progress notes that should be in their file is a discharge summary that Sarah or the case manager or case aide would write up. Let's see. If a child's placement extends beyond 72 hours, we must obtain the child's immunization records. So this is just another one. What records do we need to have of our kids? So if we request the information, like from a social worker or a parent, we document that in the child's file, so that when licensing comes through and they want us to make sure that we're meeting this WAC, we can't make the parents give it to us. As long as we make the attempt to request it, that meets the requirement. We just have to have documentation, the dates and times when we requested this. We can't, we don't want to be penalized for not getting it, because we can't make the parents give it to us if they don't want to. Oftentimes social workers will have it and they'll give it to us, but sometimes the parents or guardians are more challenging due to their home environment, or they don't have it and they would have to go find it. Sometimes we can ask clinic, and clinic has a system that if the kid is immunized in Washington State, they can pull up the information that way. So here, like I said, if you're unable to obtain this information, you just need to document it in the child's file. What information can be shared about a child or a child's family? So the information that can be shared about a child's family is individual and case by case. So it needs to be people who are going to be involved in the case plan. For children placed by the department, you can discuss whether the information about the child and family can be discussed with other department representatives, a representative from the Department of Health, a group residential program staff. So all of us are able to have the information, because we need the information to best serve the youth. The child's attorney can have the information, or we can share information with them. And so all of these people that we have listed in this section, we would have releases of information for. So there's a whole section in the client child binder that's of releases information, because we want to make sure that the youth is okaying us to give this information out. Sometimes they don't want their attorney to have information, or they don't want us to call their school, so they don't give us consent to call the school, or those sorts of things. So we have to have, for anybody we talk to about a youth in the youth case, we have to have the youth sign a consent form saying it's okay for us to release information or have any contact with anybody about their case. So, even if somebody calls our program and said, hey, is Johnny here? We're not supposed to say, yes, Johnny's here. We're supposed to say, I can't confirm or deny that somebody, that somebody with that name is here. If you want to leave your name and number, I can give you, if they are here, I can give them your number and have them call you back. When we've had kids for a while and we kind of know who their parent is or who their attorney is, we kind of, we will let them talk to the youth. But when a new kid or somebody's in the program that doesn't give those sort of consents, we can't confirm that they're in our placement at any time unless they give us permission. So, even if they want their friends to call, we have to say, you know, make the same statement to the friend saying, well, I can't confirm or deny the person's here. I can take a message, and if they are here, I can give it, you know, I can pass on the message and they can call you back. And then that's what we do. We write it in a message, and then we give it back. And, you know, we give it to the youth, and the youth can call them back. So it's a lot of stuff, but, you know, once you're kind of in it, for consistency, it'll be easy to pick up. You may check with your child. Oh, so this is about school and teachers. So we need to figure out if the teacher really needs the information. Does the school really need the information? So you want to check with their parent or guardian or their DSHS worker to see kind of what sort of information we're allowed to share with, you know, like the teacher, the counselor, the doctor, the respite care provider, any other professionals. Or other people they want to be involved in the case plan, because the family has the right to make, or the youth actually has the right to determine who they want the information shared with. You know, so we'll get consent from a parent, but for us to have deeper conversations with the family, we still have to have a release of information for us to be able to give, you know, information to the family. And it has like check boxes, and there's certain things that, you know, that there's like STIs and pregnancy tests. So there's certain boxes of things that they can check that we can give information about. You know, some families don't want their kids on birth control, but their daughter wants to take birth control. So we don't want to, you know, blow them out of the water. So we don't give the family that information. So they don't sign that part of the release. So this is, you know, this, I didn't highlight this one. What incidents involving children must I report? This is the mandated reporting information that Whitney went over yesterday. So what are my reporting responsibilities when a child is missing from care? So we call this a run or an AWOL, so absent without leave. So it just depends. I mean, it doesn't matter what you call it, if you call them AWOL or run. I think, Whitney, you guys call them AWOL, right?
We call them runaway.
Okay, you call them runaway. Okay. So what are the reporting responsibilities when a child is missing from care? So there is, so missing from care is a definition at the front of the book, so where it has the definitions. So there's a very specific, what does missing from care mean? So as soon as you or a staff have reason to believe a child in your care is missing or has refused to return or to remain in your care, or whose whereabouts or otherwise unknown, you are required to notify the following. So you have to notify their social worker as appropriate, so or their parent or guardian. Children's administrator intake, if you've contacted the social worker and the social worker or parent or guardian doesn't answer, then you would call the 1-800-1866 end harm number. So you would call central intake. It says you are required to contact law enforcement within 6 hours if a child is missing. However, if one or more of the following factors present, you must contact law enforcement immediately. And so this is where, so this is the challenge. I mean, so it does give us a 6-hour window, but if you read through these risk factors, there's an argument that every one of the kids that we serve in our program would meet at least one of these risk factors. So the child is believed to have been taken from placement. That means the child's whereabouts are unknown. The child is believed to have been lured from placement or left placement under circumstances indicate the child may be at risk of physical or sexual assault or exploitation. The child is age 13 or younger. So we do have 12 and 13-year-olds to enter our program. If the child is 12 or 13, you have to call immediately. There's no 6-hour window. You don't have a grace period. As soon as we realize that they're not where they're supposed to be or they're not back at the program when they're supposed to be, we need to call immediately. And that's just the kind of, so somebody is out looking for them. The child has one or more physical or mental conditions that is not treated daily, will place the child at severe risk. So if we have kids that are taking insulin and they're gone and we only gave them 1 dose of insulin to take with them and we know that that they need 2 more already, that would be it, having somebody that's at severe risk that we want to make sure that we call. So somebody is looking for them. The child is pregnant or parenting. And that's if they have a child that's with them or they're feared to be like with a child that, they want to be with, but we don't have youth with children in the program. I mean, we have youth that have had children, but they're not in the program together. So we want to make sure that if a youth is pregnant and they take off, we want to make sure to notify immediately. If we know that they were supposed to be going on a pass or something with their child, but their child is physically living with somebody else, that's kind of different. I'm sure that youth would meet the call immediately requirement based on one of these other factors. The child has intellectual or developmental disabilities that impair the child's ability to care for himself. The child has serious alcohol or substance abuse problem, or the child is at risk due to circumstances unique to that child. And so if none of these other A through H qualify, every one of our kids would meet the definition of I. The child is at risk due to circumstances unique to that child. And so our general practice with 12 and 13-year-olds is to call immediately. And then we have like a grace period, usually, like an hour window, like they're supposed to be back at 4, they show up at 4:45, that's fine. If they're not there by 5 o'clock, then we would start the run process. Sometimes during that process, the kid will return, and then we just stop the process or call the police and tell them they came back or whatever. But we want to start the process. We don't want to have a kid that's out there and in crisis or in need of help and not have somebody looking for them. We've had an incident like that at shelter where the youth called and said they were on their way back and they didn't show up, and then they called and said they were fine. When they finally came back, they had been beat up and assaulted by a group of people behind Safeway down on Rainier Beach. And so, had we called like we should have, somebody would have at least been looking for this young lady. So after contacting law enforcement, you must also call the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And then the number's there. The number is also hanging at all the programs. There is a web-based version that you can do online now to file a NCMEC report. And so we can, some of the staff at the program probably have that information. So if you want, it's easier for you to do it online than on the phone, then that's an option. So you must provide the following information to law enforcement. So when law enforcement comes out, you have to let them know when the child left. Even if they left at 8 o'clock in the morning to go to school, that's the last time we've seen them. So that's when the child left. The last known location of the school. So if we called and checked attendance and we knew that the child was at school, then that would be their last known location. Like, hey, we called at noon. They said they'd been to first and second period. That's kind of the last. What was the child wearing? Sometimes we don't know this. I don't know what my kids wear sometimes when they leave the house. Well, they're adults, and most of them are adults now. But if we know what they're wearing, to give them information, and any known behaviors or interactions that may have caused the child's departure. So if they were, they had gotten an argument with their parent, or they were in a disagreement with somebody else and one of their peers, or, those sorts of things. If there's some kind of antecedent that you notice happened right before that person left. Possibly, you also want to let the police know if there's a possible place where the child may go. So if, the youth is in state custody but wants to live with their mom, and we know that oftentimes when they take off, they go to their moms, that would be information we would give them, that they might be at their mom's house. Special physical or mental health conditions or medications that affect the child's safety. So we want to let the police know that. Known companions, if we know who some of their friends are, or if they've called and we have a phone number written down for one of their friends, the police might want that. Other professionals, so this would be like their therapist or their probation officer or any of those other sort of connections that they have with significant adults or other service providers, make sure that we have that. And then a recent photo, if we have it. We don't take pictures of our youth at Shelter, Hope Center, and Pathways. Do you guys take pictures at CASA, Whitney?
Yes, we have to upon their first day.
Yeah, so we don't give pictures. Because we don't take pictures. I mean, just as an agency policy, we don't have, pictures of the youth. We don't take pictures of the youth with our phones, with agency phones, with cameras, or any of that type of stuff. We need releases of information for all that. And so we try to steer clear of that just to maintain the confidentiality of everybody in the program.
I have a question, Danny.
Yes.
Just because I'm curious. So if a youth runs and the youth is found in their, let's say, mother's house, right? Just like that example you gave, what then happens?
Well, it depends. Sometimes, if they're a state kid, sometimes they'll go, they'll be transported to the DSHS office and reconnect with their social worker. Sometimes the police will call us and ask us if they can come back. Sometimes if they have a warrant or something else out for it, like they might end up going to detention. They're not supposed to arrest youth for status offenses such as running anymore and put them in detention. So they're trying to figure out other options. They end up going to Spruce Street if they can't get, if the police can't contact a family member or have a safe place that they can take them. So.
Great. Thank you.
So you must ask law enforcement for a missing persons number. So they'll, when they come out, they'll file an incident report number. They'll give you that incident report number. You make sure that the social worker has that, or you can also give it to the parent or guardian. At any time after making an incident report, initial report, you learn the whereabouts of a youth, you need to contact their social worker and also let the police know. If a youth returns to your care, it's your responsibility to cancel the run report and notify all persons you have informed of the child's run. So when you call, all the people that you call to let them know that they ran, you also call them and know that they've returned. Let them, if they come back to the program, you let them know that they've returned.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
If they're known to have like a cell phone, child, are we able to try to really like reach out before we take that step, or what's the
and so what generally happens, so if they're if they're 12 and 13 and they have a cell phone, we would contact them immediately. Just because we have to report immediately. If they don't answer the phone, then we would continue on with the run report. If they answer the phone and they're like, oh, the bus, buses aren't running, or the bus broke down, because we get it all the time. The bus broke down, oh, the bus didn't show up, all those things. So I'm going to be a few minutes late. We might give them like, well, where are you at? And then like staff have gone on and like did the bus routes, like, okay, you're at, 35th and Jefferson, the bus is supposed to be there at this time. You should be back to shelter by 5 o'clock. We would do that. And then if they're not back by 5 o'clock, at that point, we would call a run. If a youth is, is over, like is 14, 15, 16, 17, we call their cell phone, we check, to see, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm running late. Then we don't have to file the report immediately, but we want to document that at that time we made contact with them. They answered the phone. They said that they were at this place, and then, also ask them like, hey, well, what time are you going to be back? You're already 15 minutes later. They're like, oh, I'm just down the street. I just got off the bus. I'm walking up the hill, those sorts of things. Yes, but we can reach out. The short answer is yes, you can reach out and check in with them. But before determining whether you should contact or call a run or not, you can always call the on-call supervisor to check, to see if, based on this kid, this might be a kid that comes back 30 minutes late from every time they leave the house. Or this is a kid that's never late and you can't get a hold of them by phone, then we want to call immediately, just because this is a circumstance that is unique to this person. They always answer the phone. We know they have their phone. They're usually really responsible. This is outside of their normal, their normal pattern. So, and we try to, and if somebody, we have kids that have like bust from Tacoma and weird things have happened, they miss their connection, those sorts of things. Staff continually reaches out and calls them. If it stretches out over hours, sometimes we've been like, okay, well, you were supposed to be back 2 hours ago. We're calling in a run now, because when the youth comes back, if they show up back at the program, like an hour later or 2 hours later, we can cancel the run if we want to. We can call the police and say, hey, they returned. We just want to cancel the run report. But if they don't return, at least we've already started the process, and, heaven forbid, if something happened to them, there's somebody out there looking for them. So that's kind of why we do this whole run process.
Okay. One more quick question. On the national,
Missing Children's Clearinghouse. Yes.
Yeah. So would we do that same thing? Is there some type of process if they end up showing up? Do we need to reach out to them as well in some way, or just please? Yes.
So we have actually gotten kids from, placed by their social workers at, the program, and then went on the, NCMEC is what it's called. We went on NCMEC to look to see if another youth who we don't have consent for yet is on there, and we happen to run across a youth that is currently in our program. We can call NCMEC and let them know, like, hey, this youth is on, they're currently at our place. They were placed here by the social worker. Then NCMEC will reach out to the social worker, because we can't take anybody off of the National Clearinghouse. Like, that has to be done by a parent or guardian or social worker. Even though we filed the run report, we can't take them off of there. That has to be done by somebody other than us, in most cases. So
is the general procedure then just to let it be at that point if they do show up? Because I'm hearing like we call the police to let them know if they do show up. Is that the last step that we take then?
Yeah. And you can let NCMEC know. We can call NCMEC and let them know, like, hey, this, we filed a run report, this kid showed up. And then they do whatever they do with that information. So sometimes they'll call the parent, sometimes they'll, because we give them all that information when we file the report with them. So we can always call and tell them. And my cat is over here snoring. Boy, he must have had a rough night. So what are my reporting requirements? Did that answer your question, Rebecca?
Yeah, so it sounds like it's something that we can do, but it's not necessarily like general practice.
No, I mean, it's something that, I mean, if they do show up, we can call them.
Right,
Part of the,
that we can do, but it's not expected.
no, well, so, I mean, it says that, so the WAC says that everybody that you call to notify the run, you have to call and let them know that they returned.
Okay, got it.
Yes. Sorry if that wasn't clear. Yes. So, I mean, if we've called them, now if the kid shows up before we've called them, then we don't have to call them. But I mean, everybody that we've called to notify that the kid has ran, we need to call back and let them know that they returned. What are my reporting requirements if my license serving homeless and runaway youth? So we are. Let's see, within 72 hours, preferably within 24 hours, we have to, this says notify the parents or guardians. We have to have consent within 72 hours. I brought this up with a number of people because notifying somebody and getting consent to me is two very different things. Somebody can call me and be like, hey, Danny, we got your kid at this program. He's doing fine. Things are great. Like he can stay here for a couple of days and hang up the phone, which would be notifying of where my kid is at. We have to have consent within 72 hours. And consent is we let the parents know that the youth is here and they are signing off on it's okay for them to stay. So even though the WAC just says that we need to notify, we have to have consent within 72 hours. And so if we call the parents, you know, for 24 hours and they're not answering, then in that time, we have to also be looking on NCMEC to see if they've been reported as a runaway, as well as also contacting their home district. So like if they were from like West Seattle, we'd want to call the West Seattle precinct and see if they had an active run report based on the name and birth date they give us. The thing about NCMEC is it generally has pictures of the youth. So even if a youth tells us the wrong name and they're sitting in front of us, we can generally see that this person is obviously the person in the picture, and then, you know, then work on like correcting their name and figuring out like, you know, the real contact information. So calling for consent must happen as a youth care policy at least once every 8 hours. So if a youth comes in at midnight, we don't have to call, you know, at 4 a.m. We can wait till 8 a.m., but that the first call has to happen within 8 hours. So preferably if they come in at 7 at night, we do it sometime before midnight, as opposed to like the last 3 hours, you know, like at 3 o'clock in the morning. So we want to also be respectful, but also as a parent, I would like to know even at 2 a.m. if somebody showed up, if, you know, if my child showed up somewhere, that somebody call me, at least let me know that they're safe. So out of respect and kind of working with the parents, we want to respect their sleeping pattern, but we also want to respect that they might be really, really worried about their youth and be happy that at least they're someplace safe. Yes, go ahead.
What if the parents aren't reachable within that 72-hour period for whatever reason?
So yeah, good question. So within 72 hours, so if you can't, the next part, if you can't reach the family within 72 hours, or if there's compelling reasons exist, you have to notify Children's Administration. So if we had a kid that showed up at our program that had bite marks on their face, and, you know, and she said that her dad did it because, you know, whatever reason, we would not then feel like we needed to call him and get consent. You know, this is a safety risk. It appears to her based on the marks and stuff, you know, the information they're giving us. We feel like us telling the father where she is going to put her at greater risk. So at that point, we wouldn't even try to call the parents. We would directly call Children's Administration, so that 1-800-1866 end harm number, and start the process that way, which would have to end up in them being put into protective custody. So it's called getting a client PC'd, which is protective custody. So protective custody is something that has to, it's a delicate balance between what the police can do and what the state have to do. So they have to kind of work together and agree that they're willing to, both entities, both the police officer has to take them, and then the social worker has to be willing to come pick them up or meet them and sign temporary paperwork for the protective custody to occur. So we'll get pushback from both sides. Both the police will be like, no, they got a safe place to go. You know, so we have to really advocate for what we think is best. And sometimes it's us calling the 1-866 end harm number and telling them, hey, we got this kid, we're about to call the police, you know, that they got bite marks, like we have concerns for their safety, we need to start protective custody, and then call the police and be like, hey, we've started this process, when you come out here, the social worker will meet you. So I mean, it's a balance of you know, kind of advocacy that you have to do on both sides, because sometimes police will just come pick up a kid and take them home. And if we have significant concerns for their safety, we want to make sure that we have the system in place so that we can actually keep them without having to notify their parent. But then the protective custody is only good for 72 hours. So after that 72 hours, or in that 72-hour window, the state is supposed to be contacting the parent and doing a family assessment and those sorts of things. That's what that 72-hour protective custody is for. And that's kind of what we were talking about during the staff meeting with the youth that's mom was on a VPA. That's kind of how she got on the VPA, because the family can voluntarily place a youth with the state, which is a voluntary placement agreement that we talked about earlier. And so, I mean, there's a number of different ways that the kid can stay in our care, but we want to make sure that we're only making calls to children's administration if it's, if it seems like there's significant risk to the child, if we let the family know their whereabouts. Otherwise, we're responsible. We are required to contact their parent or guardian. If a youth is just mad because the parent took away their cell phone, like that's not a reason that we wouldn't call their parents and let them know they're there. Now, if they say they're being sexually abused by the parent, their parent's partner or their siblings or whatever, then we would make the call and not want to contact the parent to let them know where they are. So, I mean, it's a delicate balance of, trying to meet the needs of the youth and also respecting the rights of the parents. But where those two things collide is the safety of the youth, and that's what we want to make sure that we're taking into account. And so this C is just talks about, that you must contact the state patrol every 8 hours, which is the NCMEC. So on top of calling and trying to get consent every 8 hours, you have to also check the missing children's clearinghouse every 8 hours while the youth is present in the facility, or until you get consent. Once you get consent, you don't have to call every 8 hours and you don't have to look on NCMEC anymore. So what are requirements for indoor recreational areas? You must provide indoor recreational areas appropriate to the children's age and development level. So, I mean, and if you have a group care for more than 12, which is Hope Center, you have to have one separate space indoors. And so Hope Center is a lot bigger and has a lot more space than Shelter, but Shelter's only licensed for 12. Where Hope Center is licensed for 14. So Hope Center also has a room downstairs in the basement where you can go. There's a big TV down there where you can do arts and crafts or watch movies and that type of stuff. So that's a requirement for indoor recreation. Oops, look, I don't know what happened. Hold on, go back to page 17.
Can I ask a quick question while you're looking for that?
Uh-huh.
Speaking of movies, what's the policy around like choice of what's being viewed? Is there any type of guidelines that we need to understand about that?
Yes. Okay. And so there's not a WAC requirement. I have set a standard at Shelter over the past 12 years that if we have a 12-year-old, the kids really hate the program because they're not able to watch like PG-13, PG-14, movies. They can only watch, PG and G movies. And the 16 to 17-year-olds that are in the program with them really hate that. So, and that I just do that, and it's not a WAC or anything, but I mean, I feel like those standards were set by somebody who knows what's in this sitcom, TV show, movie better than I do. So there must be things that could potentially be inappropriate for a youth under the age of 13. So I therefore don't let them watch it. And I think we have Netflix of the program. I think it's set at PG-14, but we monitor that if there's a 12-year-old that's in the program. We don't take them to rated R movies. We feel like those are things that we shouldn't be making those decisions. Now, if there was a rated R movie that was around maybe like civil rights or something like that, if a staff goes and sees it and just says, oh yeah, it's just dealing with really hard issues and that's why it's rated R and there's not like sex and drugs and violence and that type of stuff, we might contact the parent or guardian if we felt like there was an educational purpose to see if it would be okay if we took their youth to see this movie. and then this is what we're planning, and these will be kind of the steps, and we want to process with them after we leave, and this is kind of the group we're going to have, and those sorts of things. But in my 12 years at shelter, we've never taken kids to a rated R movie. We've never brought in a rated R movie. Now, kids have brought in movies from the library that are rated R, and so staff really has to be cognizant of that and make sure that they're checking those things, because they'll slide it in given the chance and opportunity.
The other thing, sometimes even PG-13 movies can show quite a bit of violence. So, especially for a lot of our kids who have survived violence, right? Even if it's at the right level, it can still be very triggering and traumatizing. So in CASA, we always encourage staff to like closely monitor what the kids are watching, and if it starts to turn really violent, like we empower our staff to just tell them, turn it off, like explain what's happening to the kids and tell them, it doesn't help the environment that we want to create. And so ask them to change the channel or help them find something new.
Yes.
And so you had mentioned the filter restrictions at shelter. Is it different for Hope? Is there a different
So at Hope Center, theirs is set on PG-14. And so I'm working on trying to figure out the best model. I'm thinking, this will be coming out. I'm trying to figure this out before we separate. I'm thinking of dividing the programs into a younger program and an older program so that, we can develop a program that is beneficial to older youth and, does more independent living groups and can have, like healthy relationships groups, because that group is going to be way, more in depth and more advanced than you would necessarily want to talk to most 12-year-olds about, like relationships and those sorts of things. And so I in trying to have programming for a 12-year-old and a 17-year-old, we always have to program for the 12-year-old because they're the ones with the restrictions and can't do everything that the 17-year-old can do. And so those are decisions I'm currently wrestling with in my head to try to figure out, is that the best way, or is male, female, so I'm trying to figure out. But I'm thinking age is the best way to divide the program. So like 12 to 15 and 15 to 17, and just kind of depending on, the needs of the 15-year-old would kind of determine where they go. With some other, and so at Hope Center, theirs has, because they served an older population previously, that wasn't, it wasn't said that that's what they're for, but they served kind of a harder, older population. They always had their set for PG-14. And at shelter, we didn't have Netflix until just recently. So we're trying to come to some middle ground so that it's kind of consistent between the two. But if it's differentiated by age, then the lines are clear on like what you can watch at one program versus the other. So those are our thoughts around that. Thanks. So here we go. What are your requirements for storing chemicals or other substances? So you must store the following items in place that's not accessible. And this is to preschool children, which is why I didn't highlight it, or other persons with limited capacity or who might be endangered by access to these products. So this is, cleaning supplies, toxic or poisonous substances, aerosols, and items with warning labels. And so we want to, and so with this, we don't have preschool children, but we do have kids that are often suicidal that would try to like drink, cleaning products or, huff aerosol cans or, those sorts of things. We've tried to figure out a way that, I can have my perfume in my room as a 17-year-old female, or I can have my Axe body spray as a 17-year-old male. And so we have actually had conversations with DLR and licensing to see, what are the limits? Because it's always about, yes, this one youth might do really well with it and not have an issue with it, but what if this other youth goes in their room and uses it for a purpose unintended and then therefore, has to go to the hospital, and then we as an agency or staff are answering why the kid had access to, whatever these things are. And so that's the challenge, because why as a teenager can't you have body spray, in your room? As my kids had their body spray and stuff in their room, it wasn't an issue. And so trying to create something that's kind of normal but also meets the safety of the program. So those are kind of the things when we're going through kids stuff and they're like, well, why are you taking my perfume? This is the WAC that it applies to, which, and so that's why I like to go through the WACs, is because people don't understand why some of the rules and they feel like, we're just being like mean and we don't want them to have it. Like there generally is a reason other than I just don't like kids and I don't want them to be happy. Right. So this is the reason why when we go through their things, we would also pull out, like, anything that's like sharp, like razors or scissors or Sharpies, just because they've done damage. You can do some damage with the Sharpie. I mean, so there's like certain things that we put in a box in the office that when they want to use them, they can come use them, but then they have to be turned back into the office. And this is when you get pushback or you're meeting with a kid to discuss this policy or why you're taking those things. I mean, you can just let them say, it's out of our control. This is a licensing requirement, by the program. They can always, write me a letter or whatever and ask if they can have their, perfume in their room. And, I would consider based on, the other kids that are in the program who could have, and, or, we have kids who have stuff in their room and we tell them, well, you need to make sure that your room is always locked and you're, and shut when you're not in your room. So the other people can't have access to it. So it's we look like the people at the programs that are making the rules. But we're not. Like, we are making the rules, but it's based on generally something else. So when containers are filled, so we have at Hope Center, they have like a system in the wall that dilutes chemicals to the appropriate mixture. So we just need to make sure that we're not mixing bottles and using, a bottle from the pink spray that still has half of the green spray in it. You want to make sure that you're only putting the appropriate chemical back in the bottle. And then when it is, make sure those are labeled, and then make sure that you're not storing it with food. So how must I keep children safe around bodies of water? So for swimming pools and bodies of water, I can give you the quick. So we only take youth to swimming areas, whether it be a beach, at a park, or the swimming pool, where there is a lifeguard present. I heard that this summer that's not going to be an option, because I heard a lot of lifeguards aren't going to be working this summer. So like we could take them to Green Lake, and from noon to 7 they could swim, but as soon as the lifeguard leaves, we have to get out of the water. So I mean, that it's a challenge. And then youth also need to, before they can go past a certain level, which is usually the rope at either the pool or the lake, they have to do a swimming test. And so that's just the requirements that we require as youth care. This is, they say that, that you can do certain things, but for youth care's requirements, we must keep kids in air, and they can only swim in areas and go in water in areas when a lifeguard is present. So we had a staff that was a lifeguard at shelter one point, but she said she wouldn't even do that because she doesn't want that extra responsibility to what she already has to do as her job. She doesn't, because kids are like, well, we just want to go to the river, and river is a totally different beast. But I mean, if there was a lifeguard there, you could really do it. But saving somebody from a river versus saving somebody from a lake is too, the rivers are usually fast and swift, and lakes are, sometimes can be fast and swift. But in general, lakes are more, stagnant bodies of water than a river is. So we only take kids. So, and then they will ask like, hey, can we go to this park? And, can we just put our feet in the water? Well, the feet in the water ends up to the knees in the water, ends up to the waist in the water, ends up to the, to the chest in the water. If you give kids inches, they will try to figure out how far they can go. So we just make it clear that they can only go in the water if a lifeguard is present. So, and staff have to supervise while they're in the water. So you can't go to your car and like get smoke a cigarette or whatever because they're being watched by lifeguard staff. Still has to be in the area keeping an eye on the kids. You don't have to be in the water with them, but you have to have your eyes on the kids. Oh, let's see. So what are the requirements for sharing bedrooms? So Pathways has individual bedrooms. Hope Center has 11 individual bedrooms and 2 that are shared, or 9 individual and 2 that share. It must be 10 and 2 that share because they have 14. Yeah, so they must have 10 bedrooms that are single, and then 2 that share because they have the capacity for 4. And so this just talks about like the requirements for the bed, beds when you're like flipping rooms. So when a kid moves out, you're putting new stuff in there. You want to make sure that the mattresses have pads on them, that they have bed bug cases on them, the pillowcases or pillows have been washed, or the pillows are protected in protective, like waterproof, what are they called? Pillowcase things that go, what are they, pillow covers? Yeah, so you want to make sure that they're in a pillow cover, or they're being washed after every use, so that we're not, you know, spreading lice and those sorts of things. So we want to make sure that the room is clean and comfortable for the youth. Youth can't share a bed, and youth can only share rooms with same genders. So the challenge is we do serve a lot of transgender youth, and, you know, deciding, I always let the transgender youth decide if they, you know, if they're male identifying and they want to be on the male side, then I would figure out a way to put them in a room on the male side at shelter. At Hope Center, there's the rooms are kind of on the outside ring of the building, so there's not like one side versus the other. But we generally wouldn't put transgender youth in a double room. We try to give them their own room, unless we happen to have, at one point we had like 4 female to male clients, and we did bump them up together. But we would never put a male identifying youth in the room with a female client, whether they're transgender or not. So does that make sense? And then another thing that I have talked to people about that's not in here is I also do room considerations when I'm putting people in rooms. So if you do have to, you know, you have 11 kids and you're getting a 12th kid and you need to double up a room, I also make sure that kids aren't in rooms together that are more than 24 months apart. I worked with sex offenders for years and understand the, you know, liability and the laws around, you know, sex offenses and what constitutes a sex offense. And there's a real, you know, the severity of what happens increases after 24 months. Like a, you know, a 15 and a 17-year-old, because they're within 24 months of each other, is not going to get in trouble. Now, a 15-year-old and a 17-and-a-half-year-old sleep together, then the 17-year-old can be charged as a sex offender, because the 15-year-old is not old enough to consent. And the only reason he's old enough to consent with the 17-year-old is because the age different there, the 24-month period. So I would never put a 12-year-old and a 17-year-old in a room together unless they are a biological family. So if we have sibling groups, we will sometimes put larger age ranges together as long as they're siblings. So this is just laundering. Just make sure that you are separating soiled laundry. So if we have kids that are, you know, are wetting the bed, that we have a place in the program and there's a laundry room where you can have soiled linen and clean linen where they're in separate places. So, and then we have washers and dryers, and make sure that the laundry is done on a regular basis. We try to have kids do their laundry at least once a week and then wash their linens and stuff on the weekends. Oh, so here's electronic monitoring devices. So Children's Administration prohibit use of video and audio monitoring of children interior of a group residential facility. So, and unless, it doesn't even matter, because we won't ever meet those requirements. So we are not allowed to film, videotape, record, audio record, or any of those sorts of things in the common area of the program. So no monitoring devices. We can't record them on our phone. You know, if like, you know, a kid's escalated and we really feel like somebody needs to hear it, like that's a violation of the WAC, and we're not allowed to do that. And there are no cameras or anything inside the program. We have cameras around the perimeter of Hope Center and at the front door of shelter. But other than that, there are no other recording devices inside the program. Okay. So what are the requirements for prevention of spread of infectious and communicable diseases? And the only reason I highlighted this one is just because where we're at, you know, that we're doing a lot more cleaning now than we were doing before. I mean, we always clean the program, but now we're making sure it has to be sanitized at least 4 times a day. I know somebody sent out something about 12 times a day. We just don't have, I mean, if you wipe it down every time you go by, whatever, but we don't have the time to, you know, make sure that we're hitting all the high touch areas 12 times a day. So we're trying to make sure that we're doing it at least 2 times on day shift and 2 times on graveyard. And if we offer a swing shift, then we would want to make sure it was done on there as well. And then TB testing is something that's done when staff get hired. You don't have to test again for TB unless there's been a case of exposure from the last time you were tested. So, I mean, if like your family member gets TB, then we would want you to get tested. If a youth in the program has confirmed TB, then we would want to get you tested. But other than that, you just need the initial one when you start, and then as needed at that point. And I'm sure that this WAC will probably change post the coronavirus. And so I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but I'm sure that the Department of Health is going to send out new guidelines for us. So you must promote personal hygiene to prevent the spread of germs. So we try to make sure that kids aren't bringing like their blankets that they're sleeping on in their bedrooms out into the common area. We have provided like little lap blankets that the kids can use in the common area, and those have to be just put in the dirty clothes and washed every night. And so the grave staff wash those every night, just to prevent like scabies, and so there's reasons we want to prevent scabies, head lice, and those sorts of things that can be carried on blankets and that type of stuff. So we don't want somebody who's using the blanket in their room to bring their blanket that they've slept in all night out onto the couch. And then there's all other supervision issues with that. So that's why we got just like the lap blanket, so they could wrap up their shoulders or whatever, but we don't want them in big bulky blankets in the common area.
Probably not the best that we have like a life-size teddy bear that just sits in the custodial you.
Oh, well, we have a big blob that apparently.
What I'm hearing is that's not a best practice.
No, I'm sure. Look, shove it in the dryer. And so, we do ask kids to try to take showers. And I mean, we've had conversations around this because, the number of showers and washing your hair and those sort of expectations can be really culturally relevant. And so we try to have people take showers, at least once every couple of days. And we're not demanding that people are washing their hair. African Americans don't wash their hair nearly as much as other races. And so we want to make sure that we are being like culturally responsive to those sorts of things. Hold on real quick. What? No, you haven't even eaten anything, and you haven't brushed your teeth or anything. Go. You can do that. You can go outside after that. And we also want to make sure that we're isolating sick children. So we have a sick day policy. So if a youth is saying they can't go to school because they're sick, we as staff, they're supposed to stay in their rooms and remain in their rooms. But I mean, we have the miracle cure, which happens to be 3:00 because at 3:00 suddenly they're not ill anymore and they want to be welcomed back into the common area so they can play video games and stuff. So if that, so generally if that happens on a consistent basis, of course we wouldn't let it continue. Then there would have to be other consequences. But I mean, if you were feeling sick in the morning, you're feeling better in the afternoon, then we try to let you come out. If you still have symptoms, like right now, if you have a fever, a cough, those are kind of the primary ones we're looking for in the program. We're asking you stay in your room. And we, like I said before, we also have everybody wearing masks so that they can keep their germs covered if they cough or when they're talking and that sort of thing. So everybody is required to wear masks in the program, which this doesn't say, but I'm sure that will come out, something will come out, especially when a youth or somebody is feeling sick, and how to isolate them. So some of our current practices to prevent the spread of germs, which is not in here because this is COVID. So staff are taking their temperature twice a shift. So when they first get on shift, they're washing their hands and having their temperature taken. And then at some other point during the shift, they're washing their hands a whole bunch, but they're also taking their temperature again. Clients are also having their temperatures taken twice a shift. So usually they do it, in the morning and then the afternoon, and then they'll do one at night and then one again at first thing in the morning when they get up, just to check, because we've seen that what we've identified or what has been identified as one of the primary identifying signs that you have the COVID-19 virus is the cough and the fever. So the fever is kind of what pushes it over the edge, because people can have a cough from hay fever and those sorts of things, but you generally don't get hay fever and have a fever. So there are other things that are constant, and this is what's happening now. It doesn't mean that next week it's not going to totally change, because I mean, it's been evolving over, the past 3 months. Everything that we're doing has evolved, and it's just kind of ramped up. So we want to make sure that we are preventing transmission of communicable diseases and then also reporting. So we do have a reporting requirement. If somebody in the program tests positive for COVID-19, we have to report to the Department of Health. And then there's a whole other slew of things that happen when somebody does test positive. We want to make sure that we follow proper hygiene when the first aids. We want to make sure we're using gloves and we're caring for minor illnesses. Actions to be taken for medical emergencies. You want to make sure that, you know, all these procedures, that you're using universal precautions when addressing these different issues. And I mean, we don't have infants, but I mean, you would also wear gloves and stuff at all times when working with, you know, changing children or infants if they were in the program. First aid supplies, you know, what should we have in the program? And if we don't have them and you see we're running out, please let us know, because these should be in the program at all times. We had a challenge with gloves, which is the first one. Because, you know, with everybody wanting gloves, all of a sudden we had a shortage of gloves. So we are working on building up a supply of gloves in the event that COVID might happen again in the near future, or, you know, November, December. Bandages, scissors, ACE bandages, gauze, and non-breakable or mercury-free thermometers. Those are things that have to be in the first aid kit. And there should be a first aid kit in every vehicle that goes with you on outings. So are alcoholic beverages, marijuana, and illegal drugs allowed on the facility's property? And the answer is no. And staff that are working staff that are under the influence are not allowed to have contact with children in care. So we don't, and this also goes for youth bringing drugs and alcohol onto the premises or into the facility. We write incident reports for those. Possessing alcohol and marijuana is one of the things, or not just marijuana, any sort of mind altering contraband or drugs, illegal or illegal, because we have youth that have a history of taking CCC, which is an over-the-counter medication they can get at the drugstore. And so they can't have that in their rooms. If they try to sneak into the program, it is then constituted as a drug, which therefore they could end up losing placement for. Is smoking permitted around children? No, and while you're driving, the kids can't be in the van, and we don't smoke in the agency vehicle. So, but this rule cannot apply to traditions of spiritual Native American or religious ceremonies involving the use of tobacco. So something to remember around Native American youth is they have the Indian Welfare Act laws. I forget what their Indian Licensing Welfare Act laws, it's like WAC, that applies to them. So if we do have a Native American youth, we want to make sure that we aren't doing anything without checking with like either their parent or their guardian. And sometimes certain things will require us to contact the tribe to see if it's permissible, as far as like doing things with their hair or trying to get them engaged in culturally appropriate activities and stuff. We would contact their social worker, their parent or guardian, or their tribe to ask, like, how do we get them connected to these things? Are we allowed to do this? They want to cut their hair, those sorts of things. So Native American children actually have a whole separate set of WACs that govern kind of what that can happen with them. We see a few Native youth. They come in spurts, but in general, we don't see a whole lot of Native American children. So, but when we do, we have to make sure that we're aware of those. Are guns allowed on the licensed facility property? The answer is no. Can't have guns or weapons of any kind. You can't, and then this goes for things like mace, anything that could cause harm to the youth, or, we can't have on the premises. So. What are the fire safety requirements for all residential groups homes? So you and your staff must be familiar with safety procedures related to fire prevention, including fire drill procedures. So once you get to the program, those will be things that will be discussed in the program. They'll tell you like where you would meet, like in the event of the emergency. For fire drills, you meet at the same place where you would meet as if it was a real emergency. You want to make sure that fire extinguishers are operable. Thank you, son. Are operable, and that you know how to use them. If you don't know how to use a fire extinguisher, ask somebody. There are pamphlets in the health and safety binder at the program that has information about fire extinguishers and how to spray them and how to use them. We've actually had people come out before and show us how to use them. So, that is an option too, if we have a number of people who don't feel comfortable or who would like to learn that.
There's also a lot of great YouTube tutorials that you can watch on it.
Oh yeah, look, I got here before that. When did YouTube start? Never mind. I started before YouTube was a thing. So yes, and YouTube is an excellent resource for many things. So, um, let's see. Conduct frequent inspections at your facility. And so this goes back to the safety inspections that we were talking about earlier. That this is to make sure that, kids don't have things in front of heaters, hanging over heaters, that there's not things that are fire hazards in rooms, or other areas of the program, making sure that people don't have things turned on too high, watching people cook, those sorts of things. We have to make sure that children are able to escape from every floor of the facility. Most of Hope Center is on the ground floor. So, it's just about a youth climbing out their window. And then we have to ensure that windows open. Ours don't have to open all the way to the outside. They currently do at the Hope Center, but they don't have to because we have sprinkler systems in Hope Center, CASA, and Shelter. So that, if we wanted to have blocks, and at Hope Center, they have some weird windows that you couldn't even put blocks on because they open, they like swing out. We want to make sure that kids aren't, opening their windows and climbing in and out their windows, but also we can't stop them right now because they have access to the window. So yeah, so every kid has, and so at some programs at Pathways, I know that they have ladders like inside a little thing on the wall because there's a 3-level program. There's a ladder that's right by the window. They can open the window, throw the ladder out, and climb down it. When you're doing fire drills, you don't have to do that. But you just make yourself aware that it is there in case for some reason you're caught upstairs and there's a fire. There are ladders to get out of the bedrooms. So you must have access to all rooms in the facility in case of emergency. So this is some programs created a lock policy years ago because they were worried that when you had locks on kids' rooms that staff wouldn't be able to respond quickly enough. Well, staff have keys now. All staff should have keys. We're working on that at Hope Center. They only had like 2 sets of keys and people were sharing them. But in the event of emergency, everybody needs to be able to go and respond and answer doors. So we need to make sure that if we're practicing fire drills that we're, physically going to the doors, unlocking the doors, opening the doors, and then also making sure that the doors are shut behind you. Go brush your teeth and stuff.
I did.
You must, wait till I get done. So you want to make sure in the event of emergency, know where things are and how things work. So my son made me lose my train of thought. Yeah, make sure there's not large obstacles or things in front of doors or obstacles that are preventing people from getting out of the windows. Let's see. What are the requirements for fire drills? So fire drills must be conducted at least once every month at a varying time of the day. So quarterly we have, so when we had 3 shifts, we'd have a day shift fire drill 1 month, a swing shift fire drill the next month, and then the following month we might have a grave fire drill. The grave fire drills can be simulated. They don't need to mean you have to wake up all the kids in the middle of the night and get them out of the house. It's just about staff practicing responding to the event, making sure you can open all the doors and, and knowing where you're supposed to meet if a fire was to occur. So there's a simulated fire drill that usually happens late at night, or sometimes John, the program supervisor for Shelter, will come do them at like 7 o'clock in the morning, which is, can be counted as day or grave. But that would also count if you want to do an actual fire drill. And you should try to find out what the fire alarm sounds like, because in the programs there are several different things will go off, and so you want to make sure that you're responding appropriately to whatever to make sure that if there is a fire or their fire alarm is going off, you at least know what it is. There's other weird beeps and buzzes and things that happen from windows opening and doors closing and those sorts of things. So if there is a fire drill, I would talk to John, who's the supervisor, to have so you could hear it, so you know actually what the fire drill sounds like. At Shelter and Casa Uno, we have far more beeps and buzzers than I've noticed at Hope Center, but there are still, every once in a while a smoke detector will go off and it'll just start beeping. And so just making sure there's a loud siren sound that is the fire alarm, and making sure you know what that sounds like. So being there when a fire drill is taking place is the best way to make that happen. And there must be at least one fire extinguisher on every floor. So at Hope Center, there's probably 3 or 4 fire extinguishers, one in the kitchen or one by the kitchen. And no, because I said you need to wait till I'm done. One fire extinguisher readily available at all times, and they're supposed to be mounted in brackets. You guys don't have to worry about that, but you want to make sure when you're getting a tour through the program that you check with staff and have them identify like where all the fire extinguishers are. Fire extinguisher on every floor. I think we're almost done. So service planning, what must I include in the child's orientation to my facility? So this is all when you bring in a kid and you're doing the intake, this is a lot of stuff that you would address at that time. So as part of the admission process, you want to take a description, give them a description of the program and services, which, staff usually go over, a map or a tour of the facility. So we don't have a physical map we give to kids, but we do walk them around and show them where the bathrooms are, and this is the kitchen, and, and these are the different areas that you can be in and so forth, which will probably be the same sort of tour that you guys get. Yeah, so the department approved policy that states that a child may not have a gun or other weapons, alcohol, or tobacco within the facility. So we have those policies that we have written up that the youth also sign. Orientation on personal protection and personal boundaries. So these are things that we talk about when we're talking about going through the rules and stuff with the youth. And also have the department or guardian approved visitation list. So we don't necessarily have visitors that come to the program, but if a youth is okay to go on a pass with somebody, we try to have that information written down so that we know who the kid can leave the facility with, or when they want to go to U Village that they're going to hang out with this person, that's an acceptable person. Sometimes that information is hard to get. We have a form that staff can fill out that says, I think it's like a no contact sheet. So if there are people on there, it's generally a no contact sheet. And sometimes they'll provide numbers of people that they are allowed to call. If they are limited in the people they're allowed to call, or they have like this list of people they can't contact. So sometimes staff will have to dial phones and those sorts of things based on whatever, usually it's department youth that can't have contact with their biological family or one parent or the other. So then we have to kind of supervise our calls and make sure that we're ensuring that they're calling the right person and not contacting the person that's on their no contact list. So how does my agency meet the religious needs? So we offer church services. I mean, if youth want to go to church, they can go to church. We can't force youth to go to church. We want to make sure that we are meeting that need. So, I mean, if they identify that they want to go to church and that this is the time of their service, we try to figure out how to make that happen. Sometimes I know at CASA, they have groups of kids that want to go to church or have holidays where they go to church. So both staff and all the kids will go together and they'll go to a church service. I know at one point they were bringing a pastor to Hope Center, and they were bringing some of the kids to Hope Center to meet with the pastor and have kind of a church service in the basement. So, I mean, those are options. Some kids who are into church that we get are really into church. Others, detest church and don't want to have anything to do with it. We can't penalize somebody for not wanting to go to church or not participating in that activity. So if we have a group of kids that wants to go to church, or one kid, we can have them fill out a pass and they can, catch the bus and go. We give them bus tickets. They catch the bus, go to church, and come home. If it's a group, sometimes we'll take, identify a church and take a group of kids to church. It doesn't happen very often, but I mean, it is something that has happened. With Ramadan recently passing, we had several kids that wanted to participate in Ramadan, and so we had to try to figure that with the COVID stuff, how to make that happen, and so that they can be included in that, since it is such a big event for the Muslim community. So that's all that really needs to know about that. Oops, my phone, my computers. Let's see. So what are the requirements about non-discrimination? So, I mean, we follow all state and federal laws. And so there are posters hanging in the programs about non-discrimination based on, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, culture, those sorts of things. General statement that we have. We also make sure that we are making sure that people aren't getting bullied for any of these sort of things. And youth being bullied around race, ethnicity, culture, sexual orientation, or gender identity, can result in a youth, not that youth, but the person who's doing the bullying, to be exited from the program. So we take that very, very, very seriously. Yeah, so this is, are there considerations in serving Native American youth? And so, yeah, so we must make sure that every effort is taken to find culturally relevant services for Native American youth and families. And so we can, if they have a social worker, that's usually the best connection. But some families will have a tribe that they're connected to and will give us the information about their tribe. So we can also call them to see if there's appropriate, culturally appropriate activities that they can attend. Oh, let's see. So what are the educational and vocational instruction requirements for children placed by the department? We must meet the following requirements. So all the kids in the program have to be in school or being connected with school. So the social worker might have an educational plan. Oftentimes we don't get that, but if they do, then we want to follow the educational plan. All the kids in our programs are required to go to school. So for CASA kids have a school on site, so they actually attend school at Casa Dos. They have their own school in Casa Dos with teachers and stuff that work with them in that program. For Shelter, Hope Center, and Pathways, we want to do an educational assessment with the youth when they come in if they are not already enrolled in school and try to determine what the best school plan is for that youth. And then we contact the schools every day during the day shift to check to see the attendance of each of the youth that are in the program. So we call the school, once you're there for a while and school's in session, you'll call and they'll know who you are. You'll be like, oh, I'm, Danny from Hope Center. I'm just calling about such and such as attendance. And then they just say, oh yeah, he was in, this class, missed 5th period, whatever. They kind of give us a rundown of the kids' attendance. If they don't answer, we leave a message. Sometimes they call back, sometimes they don't. But we want to try to encourage and support regular attendance in school, especially because they've been absent so much due to the inconsistency of placement. So we want to make sure that we're supporting them as much as possible. And sometimes that means that they want to do credit retrieval and we try to hook them up with that, or they want to be enrolled in school in Seattle, we might do that for them. So it's very specific and individualized to the kids, but every kid is required to be in school within 5 days, or at least having it set up within 5 days. So, and if we can't get them in school by 5 days, if we have it set up, they're enrolled, but they can't get transportation because McKinney-Vento which is the transportation piece, is taking too long, then we can't, excuse me, my mouth is getting dry. We try to get McKinney-Vento set up, which is either a cab or something, or an Uber or something will pick up the kid every day and drive them back and forth to school. We as staff don't have the capacity to be able to take 12 kids to 12 different schools every morning. So we do offer like bus tickets to youth so that they can take the bus to school. Seattle doesn't have public school buses, so they use the metro system, and so they often get Orca cards to be able to ride the bus to and from school. But if a youth doesn't have that, we do have tickets and stuff that they can use. And then we have to provide independent living schools for youth over the age of 15 years old.
Can I just ask real quick how that's working now that the COVID, like the schools have been shut down and there's so much remote stuff happening?
So right now, all of the kids that have been at Shelter recently have had school computers. We had one kid that was getting packets that they would send us a packet every week that he was supposed to be working on, but he has since got a computer. So we have designated times for them at the program to work on homework. And some kids have specific times, like 10 o'clock, they're supposed to get up and meet with their teacher online. And so we have everybody's like school schedule. And so we know what they're supposed to be working on. Some schools are doing independent, like, it's just online. They go on there, they find their assignments, they do their assignments. Whereas other kids are supposed to be meeting directly with their teachers at certain times. So we're trying as best we can to encourage them to make sure that they're up and meeting with those teachers, and then participating in the education time that we have set aside during the day. We have a time set in the morning and then a time set in the evening, like closer to after dinner time, where they can also work on it. And during those times, we just want them to do educational stuff. Even if they don't have homework, we'd have them reading a book or something and not like watching TV or playing video games and those sorts of things. So those are the kind of the identified education times. And then that way staff can be around to like support people or check in on people to see if they need support, because often our kids aren't going to ask for support. So we need to make sure that we're checking in with them so that they can receive support if they need it. Let's see, did that answer your question, Rebecca? So, I mean, at one point at Shelter or Hope Center, we had, 6 kids who had computers from 6 different school districts. One went to school in Tacoma, one went to Shoreline, one was in Seattle Public Schools. So we had all these computers so, I mean, it's not like everybody's working on the same thing, or even through the same school district. So it took a lot of navigating. It took us several weeks to make sure that everybody had the same sort of resource, but right now everybody does. What are the requirements for an activity program? We want to make sure that activities are, that we talk to the youth. I mean, we can provide opportunities of things we think they would like, but they should also be, youth initiated and staff initiated activities, free play and organized events. So, like kids want to play Uno, or if we plan, like we've had soccer games with the CASA kids, if we want to kind of plan that as an organized event. We do paid outings and those sorts of things. That's all the stuff that we do with the kids. So the paid outing is usually, well, pre-COVID, it was on Saturdays where we take the kids like the movies, roller skating, bowling, those sorts of things. And so we want to make sure that we're very aware, like we were talking earlier, of the ages of people and the group that we're taking to make sure that it's appropriate for everybody. And sometimes that means that, they end up watching a PG movie because they have a 12-year-old with them. So if we can try to eliminate that as much as possible or try to figure out a way around that, we do. I know sometimes they've taken some of the younger kids to one movie and staff has taken the other kids to another movie. So that's also an option. They should be able to have active, loud activities and quiet activities. So, there should be at Hope Center, there's a basketball court, half a basketball court. So if necessary, you can go out and play basketball. So, and, or shoot baskets, or even if, they just want to go shoot baskets as part of their activity, or just kind of get out of the house for a little while, that is an option. There's also like a jungle gym toy out there, but the kids don't ever play on it. They might sit on it, but they don't play on it. And then like this says, children must be grouped with similar ages to ensure their safety, or, just their enjoyment of the activity. What are the general well-being requirements for a group care program? So you must provide safe and healthy, age-appropriate, home-like living environment that meets medical, psychological, physical, and developmental needs of children in your care. So, I mean, this is just about, setting up the program for success and making sure that we're meeting, all of their needs. We don't do on-site medical currently. There have been talks about having that at Hope Center, as having I think part of either 45th Street Clinic or Country Doctor come into the building a couple times a week. We have psychological, we have a therapist that's in the building on a regular basis. Physical and developmental needs is, so varied based on just the different youth and where they're at. And so we kind of try to have a wide variety of activities so that at some point during the week, they're getting something that, is beneficial to them. So what is the requirement for supervising children? So you must provide and arrange supervision that is appropriate to the child's age and developmental level. Appropriate adult supervision, including ongoing and periodic checks of the child in your facility. So, I mean, this is where we were talking about in the logbook. So we try to do checks every 20 to 30 minutes, if not more often, or write in the log at least every 20 or 30 minutes that we've, if kids are in their room, that we're going and checking to make sure that they're in their room, that they're still in their room, that they're, that they aren't trying to hurt themselves, those different sorts of things. So when, a group of kids is in the milieu and other kids are in their room, we need to make sure that we are remembering to check on the kids that are in their room. Also giving personal attention, that, that can be anything from playing cards with the youth, or, just having a conversation with the youth, checking in, creating some sort of interaction, finding out what they like, and, trying to engage them in those sorts of ways. Emotional support, our kids are experiencing a lot of feelings at the program, abandonment, hopelessness, all those sorts of things. So we want to make sure that we are there for emotional support, to be able to kind of walk them through or be a support so that they can get through whatever it is that they're currently experiencing. And then provide additional supervision as needed. So, I mean, this is like if we have somebody that is on high risk watch or needs to be in direct line of sight due to a certain situation that's currently going on, or if we are trying to supervise somebody that's going to be exited because of inappropriate behavior, making sure that, you know, we are constantly watching them so that they're not able to continue to grab people and those sorts of things. So just making sure that, you know, generally kids that require special supervision by the department, we generally don't take. That's, I mean, if we see somebody, we get a referral from the state that says requires, you know, supervision, then that's usually a call I make. I go in and talk to whoever's referring them and see kind of what the special circumstances is or the supervision requirements. And oftentimes, you know, we just can't meet it and still maintain a healthy and safe environment for everybody else. So just like kids with excessive medical needs, we don't serve those youth either, just because we're not equipped to do that. And it says, you know, the supervision may require auditory or visual. So I mean, you just have to know what's specific to the youth and where kids are kind of at that point, because sometimes, you know, they'll be fine, but other times you'll need to go out and, you know, provide a more direct approach and be engaged with what they're doing. Okay, so yeah, so we do meal service, meal preparation. So we will work with the kids. And if they want to make food for the program, we try to have all the kids do the food handler's card as kind of a life skill, and just so they understand the responsibilities necessary when preparing food. If a youth doesn't want to get a food handler's card, then they're only allowed to prepare food for themselves and not allowed to prepare meals for the larger group on a consistent basis. Now, if it's just a one-time thing, you can do it as long as they're supervised by by staff. So we want to make sure that, to assist to develop self-control and judgment skills. So, I mean, this is about engaging with them and, you know, making sure you're processing as they're making choices. And self-control, we see challenges with around food at the programs. A lot of them have been food deprived. And so when we provide food, some of them will eat to the point where they're hurting themselves. But, you know, I mean, it's the fear of not having food. So we want to make sure that we are helping them with some sort of self-control at points. We've had to serve meals to people, you know, to the group, not just one person. We would serve them to the group, as opposed to letting them serve their own if we noticed that people weren't able to use self-control when eating. And it also becomes an issue. So if there's 6 people eating and 2 people out, and the 6 people that are eating dinner eat all the food, then there's no food for the 2 people that are coming home. So, I mean, there's, and then, you know, just self-control around anger and, you know, judgment skills around, you know, if that's a good idea, you know, and helping them, kind of nudging them and, you know, encouraging them to make positive choices and, you know, and become better equipped at self-control.
One more comment to add about the food preparation. Generally, if we have kids who are on, like, who may have current suicidal ideation or have recently done self-harm, you know, using a razor or knives, then those are the kids who we would not be allowing to use knives in the kitchen, you know, until their mental health has been stabilized. So just because a child asks to do something, you know, asks to cut up a fruit or something with a sharp knife, it doesn't mean that you as a staff member have to allow them to do that. I don't know if it's different for you, Danny, but I assume it's pretty standard.
Yeah, so I know at Hope Center, they have let youth use knives. At shelter, we don't. Like if youth are preparing a meal and it requires cut up onions, usually the staff will cut up the onions. I mean, I think, because we try not to do something for one youth that we wouldn't allow everybody else to do, because then it gets into that vague area of like, well, you like this person more, you trust this person more. So generally staff handle the knives and we use the knife, then we wash it, dry it, and put it away immediately. You know, like we don't ever put them in the dishwasher and that sort of thing. So I mean, I know that there have been some instances or issues with knives at Hope Center. And so we're probably going to go so that, you know, that staff should be preparing or chopping up stuff. And then that's how the youth can make it, as opposed to using knives, just because there's been a couple of knife issues over at the Hope Center. And the other thing, you know, we also have kids who have, like, you know, have hidden knives in their rooms and those sorts of things, or have a history of knives or assaulting people with knives. And so that's why at shelter we have just always prepared the food and stuff for them like in that way. So for activities, as far as high risk activities, this includes anything power driven or other hazardous equipment. And so these things are supposed to be, so we don't generally do any high risk activities at the program. We've had kids and staff that have been trapped up on a mountain because they took people for a hike and somebody got hurt and they had to be actually, gotten off the hike by the search and rescue. Like a 45-member team of search and rescue had to go get these people off the mountain. And so we generally, we'll take them for little hikes down the Burke-Gilman Trail. We might go down and look at the Snoqualmie Falls and those sorts of things. But as far as like mountain hikes and for distance, we generally don't do, just because everybody doesn't have the same capacity to be able to do those or the skills to facilitate doing those appropriately. And this also comes back to like boating. If a kid wants to be involved in like a boating activity or a skiing activity or snowboarding or those sorts of things, we must have written consent from the parent or guardian saying that they can participate and actually signing the consent paperwork for those activities. Staff, there's some activities like, they want to catch the bus and go to the pumpkin field or whatever, like we might sign that one. We would not sign an activity form for a youth to, go to a boating club or skiing and stuff like, any sort of high risk activities. That needs to have their parent or guardian, whether it's a parent or a social worker, actually physically sign the form saying that they are giving permission, just to remove the liability off of staff and youth care.
Could I ask a quick question going back to the food prep real quick? Mm-hmm. So how does that work exactly with like ingredients for a meal? What does that look like? Is there like generally a day that the program goes out and has shopping lists? Like, what does that look like?
So at the program, so we have a program coordinator at Hope Center, and that person is responsible for making menus and going out and doing all the grocery shopping and supply shopping for the program. So, as a staff, we try to, as a staff, like, so staff are expected to cook. So if you like to make, chicken Alfredo, then I would talk to Tracy, who is the program coordinator, and ask her, hey, this is a shift I work. I would really like to make chicken Alfredo, or I'd like to make, collard greens or whatever, so that it can be put on the menu for a day when you're working. And if you have special foods or whatever that you would like or want to introduce to the kids, as long as it's not crazy and a budget blower, we would like to offer them different opportunities to try different things, because they won't know they like it if they've never been offered the opportunity to have it. Did that answer your question? So we do have a person who does grocery shopping. If there's something that's missing, cream cheese or sour cream or whatever, there is also a list where you can kind of write things that are running out, or we've run out of peanut butter, or those sorts of things.
Yeah, that answers my question. Thanks.
Sorry. And so this other thing about supervision, so supervising a youth. So prior to placement, you must inquire if a child poses a risk to the other children in your facility or requires special supervision by obtaining information from a parent, a legal guardian, the child's social worker, a therapist, or a previous placement. So when people are, trying to pressure you at the program when you're doing a screening to take a youth, but they don't have any contact information for anybody, this is kind of the WAC that we fall back on. I need to know a little bit more about this kid than, what you've learned in 30 minutes. I need to have some background history, because once we get them into the program, it doesn't matter who they are, we're responsible for them. And so therefore, if we don't ask the question and find out that this youth is a sex offender before we take them, once we get them into the program, we now have an issue. So if we aren't getting enough information from the youth and then able to contact and kind of verify with somebody else, a legal guardian or a parent or something, we really need to be careful because we could be accepting youth who are outside of our scope. And you best believe that the families of the sex offenders know that they can't be accepted in programs, so they will not tell you that information. So those are just things to be aware of. And if you are getting pressure, you can just say, hey, well, I know that, part of our licensing requirements requires me to obtain some sort of, some supporting information from somebody before I just say yes. Because once they're in our program, they're responsible. And just because we have a sex offender in our program and we say he can't stay there doesn't mean the police are going to come remove him, because they don't. So this is where making sure that, usually the program, whoever's on call, the person on call will kind of walk you through this. So, you'll go over the screening sheet with whoever's on call or with Sarah. And then we'll say, well, you need to try to contact a parent or guardian or friends of youth or Cocoon House. You want to try to get some kind of supporting information to see how much of, if we can figure out like really kind of what's going on. The biggest red flags are when you do a screening with a youth and they say that they have no, that there's no risk factors. They're not having a problem with their parents. They're not suicidal. They don't use drugs. They don't get in trouble at school. They've never beat anybody up. There's usually a different story if you talk to a parent or guardian. This will be a place where you get pushback from other people trying to get kids into your program. And
So we do, as youth counselors, part of what we do is the screening process? Because
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so so for these programs, based on our contract, the Hope Center and Shelter are funded by one contract. So, and Shelter has other ones, but Hope Center is just so we share a contract. The Hope contract we share between the two programs. And we're required to answer the phone 24 hours a day and accept youth 24 hours a day. So, you might, if you're working in the middle of the night, you might get a call from the police department or somebody and they want to do a screening with the youth. They put the youth on the phone, you talk to the youth, then yes, you would call me as the on-call person and get approval for that kid to come in. And so there's a whole script that we have to kind of do the screenings. And then, we have the kind of script, but then once you've done it a couple of times, you just kind of make it a conversation so it doesn't feel like you're reading and asking specific questions when it feels more natural. So it feels more natural to the youth. And so, yes, so I try to have staff do most of the stuff that the case manager would do. Just because, if you work on Friday and a kid comes on Friday and then they leave on Monday, or, at 7 o'clock before the case manager gets in, there was nobody to do any paperwork. So the paperwork still has to be done no matter who's on shift. The case manager will go through the file and put in any like sheets and stuff that need to be for explanations and those sorts of things. But in general, the staff are, do a majority of the paperwork with the exception of the exit paperwork. The program case manager usually does like the exit, like the closing out of the progs and kind of the discharge summary and those sorts of things. But all the other paperwork and stuff that's done in the program, I have the expectation that, that all the staff know how to do them, which prepares people for like another job. So, some programs like at Pathways, they don't do, like a lot of the staff don't do intakes. Well, at every case management position in the organization is going to be required to do intakes. So you now have skills that some other people that work in the agency don't have, because that's not an expectation of them on, or a requirement, because they have 30 days to do their paperwork where we might have 72 hours. Let's see. Oh, so what must I follow when I transport children? So you must provide safe, reliable, and in compliance with law and contract requirements. So, we have a 15-passenger van. We also have 2 minivans. I sent you guys all out the training for the defensive driving and the 15-passenger training. I believe I sent those out. You have to have a driver's license, have auto insurance. And so we don't transport people. So as Shelter and Hope Center and Pathways, we don't transport people in our cars. You have to get special permission to do that. And it requires like a level of insurance that's just kind of out of this world. So none of the staff I have at Shelter or Hope Center are allowed to transport youth in their cars. You can take your car to the store and get reimbursed mileage, but you can't transport youth in your vehicle. So the youth must be in safe operating condition. And I would like to say safe is a loose term because some of the vehicles we have been less than safe. But we don't have those anymore. So the vans we have right now are relatively new vans. The 2 minivans that we have at Hope Center and Shelter are, you know, they're like brand new, even though they look like they played bumper cars with them. They were brand new when we got them. So and there's that. So I mean, we need to make sure that people are in seatbelts all times until the automobile is stopped. And then we have this fun booster seat law that says something. What does the booster seat law say, Whitney? Either they have to be 12 or 48 inches tall. You remember, because we were laughing at this.
Yeah, no, I know. We wrote a whole policy on it, but we haven't had any kids that have fallen in that range.
Right.
I don't remember specifically, but I don't think that it's weight-based anymore. It's height-based only.
Right. I think it was like 40, you had to be at least 48 inches or 48 inches tall or over 12 or something. There was an age requirement. And so we are trying to figure this out, because having a 12-year-old that has to sit in a booster seat in a van with, you know, 6 other teenagers is going to set this youth up for, you know, for all kinds of abuse. But I mean, right now that's a law. We've just been lucky enough that we haven't had any kids that met, you know, that wasn't taller than 48 inches. So we haven't had to use it, but that is a requirement. And then also, like I said previously, make sure that people are buckled in until the van is stopped or parked. So sometimes you'll stop the van and like one staff and the kids will get out of the van. But you know, kids will also start taking off their seatbelts and stuff before they get in the parking lot. And we've had more than a few accidents before we got in the parking lot. And you know, kids sliding out of their seat and ramming their knees into the dashboard because they'd already taken their seatbelt off. So just remember that stuff. I mean, it's basic stuff that, you know, same requirements as we have as, you know, as drivers of personal vehicles, except we have more responsibility and a lot more clients. Hold on, my phone's going off for whatever reason. And so, and another thing that we try to do is, so if we have 2 staff that are in the same vehicle transporting to an event, as much as, you know, we like to sit next to our coworker and chat it up while we're driving to events, I really encourage one of the staff to be in the back of the van, just so you can see everything looking forward, and that way the person driving can really pay attention to driving. If both staff are in the front 2 seats of the van, there's all kinds of stuff happening in the back of the van that you are missing, because, you know, they're grabbing each other, they're throwing stuff at each other, they're pinching each other, they're holding hands, all those sorts of things. So I really encourage staff, and, you know, I say encourage because, I mean, I would like for everybody to do it. But you need to realize that if something happens in the back of the van and 2 staff decided they were going to sit up front, then there's going to be questions about why was that the choice that was made. So for supervision purposes, it's best to have one in the back of the van. And then you can also, it's kind of like being engaged in the milieu. You can hear what's going on. If they start bantering or calling each other names and stuff, you're kind of there to mediate a lot of that stuff. So any questions about that? Can children be assigned work in a facility or work outside the facility? So yes. So we can have kids do regular chores without payment, or may assign work that is appropriate to a child's developmental level with monetary compensation. So we do pay kids allowance. And so this next one is kids. So we pay all the kids that are allowance, so they can start earning allowance as soon as they come in. And it's for shelter, it's based on their level. They had a different system at Hope Center, and so I'm trying to remember what that is, but all kids are able to earn allowance. And then like John, the program supervisor pays allowance on Sundays, or he'll get the money on Sundays and sometimes have it paid out on Mondays. So, and then we have to keep a log and a ledger saying, and where the kids sign saying we gave them allowance.
Hope Center has $1 a day.
Okay. Oh, is that you, Sarah?
Yeah, I had a technology fail.
Look, that's all right. You know, this session has been a whole hour longer than it was supposed to. What belongings must be provided to a child leaving my facility? So, so whatever a kid brings in, they should leave with the exception of drugs, weapons, those sorts of contraband things that we can't give back. Cigarette lighters, matches, those sorts of things, though we don't give back to youth. all the other stuff like their aerosols and their Sharpies and those sorts of things, we give them all those things when they leave the program or they exit the program. So, and if it's Christmas time and we buy a kid a bike for Christmas, they also get to take everything that they've earned while they were at the program. So if they were bought a bike and they leave, we don't get to keep the bike. We got to they get to take the bike with them. Do I have responsibility for a child's personal hygiene? Why, yes. So, I mean, we just need to provide a place where, they can do hygiene. And we provide, I mean, we have shampoo, body wash, hair supplies, straighteners, curling irons, blow dryers. We have everything. If there's something culturally specific that a youth wants, we can also make a purchase for that. So, I mean, if they have a special thing that they use in their hair, we can do that. We also, we've braided kids' hair. We've taken them to Jean Juarez. It has turned out not very well for some of the kids of color. So we have talked to the agency about also providing services for kids of color, which is, getting their hair braided, whether it's in singles or cornrows or whatever, and not just, taking them to this Jean Juarez school to get their hair cut. And then we also provide, for white kids to get their hair done as well. But I'm just saying, if there's something specific a kid wants to get done to their hair, and if it's within the realm of what we can do, we really try to do it to make sure, they're teenagers, their appearance means a lot to them. And so we want to try to do what we can to help them keep that up to a point. There's certain, micro singles or something we couldn't pay for, but.
How does shaving work then?
How does what?
Like shaving for like razors or is there electric?
Yeah. No, so we they have razors, and the youth takes a razor, they use the razor in the bathroom, and then they bring it out. Now, if a youth has expressed, suicide ideation or has talked about suicide, I would probably, want to talk to them more before I gave them a razor. And at some point you'd be like, I just can't give you one right now. Like, I have concerns for your safety. Maybe sit down and have a conversation with them, to kind of see where they're really at. Because the last thing we want somebody to do is take a razor into the bathroom and start hurting themselves. So, but in general, like a kid will just say, hey, I'm going to take a shower and shave my legs. You give them the razor, and then you ask for it back when they come out. We used to have a sign-in, sign-out sheet at shelter. But it was only as good as people were willing to use it. We also try to do room checks sporadically to kind of check those things, and that's generally when we find that people have taken razors and used them and then taken them back to their room. So we do searches for contraband sorts of things as needed. We don't say consistently, as needed. What are the food requirements? Yep, we're supposed to feed them. So we need to make sure that so one big thing that I want to note here is number 3 is that we can't serve home canned food. So if you like to go home and you can peaches or whatever, you can't bring those into the program and serve them to kids. So as much as we might want to, it's just not allowed, just because it doesn't have the preservatives and all the other, chemicals and stuff in it that they want us to have to make sure that it's safe and tested and not going to harm somebody. So we also must have scheduled meal times. If you are working on a weekend and it's Sunday and the old menu's coming down, please don't throw it away. Keep it, put it in my box or somebody's box, because we have to keep the menus for up to 6 months, for at least 6 months after we've used them, so that if somebody wants to come in and review them, that we have them there for them. We also want to make sure that we're aware of all allergies, and that's where I said, before, that they'll be put on the wall. And this is not only allergies, it's also cultural concerns. We have a lot of kids that don't eat pork, and making sure that we're aware of that, and that we're looking at the menu and providing alternatives. If the meal that's being prepared that night is pork, we need to make sure we have a good alternative for the people who don't eat pork. So how often do children need to be provided meals? You must provide all children a minimum of 3 meals and 2 snacks a day, which I don't know where this came from. When I was growing up, this was not a thing. I got 3 meals, 2 snacks was optional, but no. So in a 24-hour period, so we generally offer breakfast in the morning. We have lunch, and then a snack, and then dinner, and then a snack before they go to bed. So that's generally how it's set up. And that's written on the on the schedule that's hanging on the walls at the program. So it has, and so sometimes like if kids have been, like all the kids have kind of been eating all night, sometimes it's just about saying, hey, it's 8 o'clock, it's snack time. Do you guys want anything else? Or some of the best stuff that has happened is when staff goes and prepares a snack. Like, kids are a little bit old for ants on a log, but if you prepare cookies or something as a snack and set it out there for them, they really do appreciate that. Instead of just kind of, well, it's snack time, what do you guys want? And they just kind of go in there and do a free for all. That's kind of, hard to track and hard on a budget, but it does happen. We're almost done. I swear to God, we are. I feel like we've reviewed the whole book and it was only 35 pages of a 63-page book. Our written policies and procedures prescribing facilities discipline method. So yes, we do have a discipline method. So we just need to make sure that we're using positive youth redirection. And so we do not do any physical interventions, as I said earlier. Let's see, you must not withhold a child's need for necessary services, including contact with their social worker, case manager, or legal representative. So it'd be you can't stop them from calling their parents or their social worker. But with that being said, if the phone is in the office and the kid is tearing up the program, like I'm not going to let them in the office so they can also tear up the office. So we can limit it to a point. When you've been calmed down for 30 minutes, I will let you call your social worker, or I'm going to go call your social worker and let them know that you really like to call them, but you're escalated right now. And as soon as you calm down, so that there's some sort of communication that's happening. But we, if they want to call their lawyer, we can allow them to call their lawyer. But like friends and those sorts of things, and this is not even as big as issue as it used to be because, kids have cell phones or computers and are reaching out that way. So we don't get that many requests, but, we do have some kids that don't have a phone that will request to call their social worker or their case manager or something. And we need to make sure that we are providing time. Now, we have room time between 4 and 5 or 4:30 and 5, depending on the program. And so they shouldn't be doing it at that time. Like that time is for staff to kind of plan, prepare dinner and plan stuff. So they need to do it at appropriate times when they know they're supposed to be in their room. So, if it's like an urgent thing and they just happens to be room time, that's fine. But it shouldn't consistently happen every day from 4 to 5 that the girl sits in the office on the phone. Let's see. So positive methods of guidance and discipline that promote self-control, self-responsibility, self-direction, self-esteem, and cooperation. Positive methods includes redirecting, giving choices when appropriate, timeout as a method of guidance, planning in order to prevent problems, using positive reinforcement and encouraging children to express their feelings and ideas. You must not use discipline that is appropriate to a child. You must use discipline that is appropriate to the child's age and level of development. You must not use corporal punishment or verbal abuse, neglect, humiliating, or frightening punishment. And you must not discipline children in the following ways. Physical punishment, cursing, threats, humiliate, that word, and intimidation. Humiliate, I can't even say that right now. Methods or other methods that interfere with the child's basic needs. Including withholding food. And so something I'd like to say around the food thing is, if like you're taking the kids out because some kid has escalated and you get them ice cream, then I would have them eat the ice cream, at McDonald's or wherever you get the ice cream from. But we can't like go buy ice cream and say everybody's going to have an ice cream party except for this person because they got in trouble. We would never like food should not be the consequence for whatever, everybody did this, so they get donuts and you don't. Like that's not something that's permitted at all at either of the programs. So, but we can put parameters around food. Like I was saying earlier, if people are gorging themselves or overeating and that sort of stuff, we want to try to monitor that, but only to the point that it seems like it's unhealthy to him or it's depriving other people of having meals because they're sitting down eating all of it and there's none left over for other people. So just be aware of that. So food is a tricky issue to try to handle in a program. just because kids are dealing with so many different issues around food, having it, not having it, food, you know, having eating disorders, eating too much, eating too little, those sorts of things. And so we try not to have a whole lot of limitations on food. So when may a child be restrained? So I've been at youth care for 12, almost 13 years, and I've never restrained a child. And so we try to do a lot. That's where we try to encourage people to be engaged and present in the milieu, which will eliminate some of this, the need for, physical restraint, just because, you're there, you can kind of nip things in the bud before they happen. And then it doesn't get carried away as it would, or you're able to redirect stuff that's happening, because when kids are whispering and you're in the office, you can't hear what's being said. If kids are whispering and you're sitting on the couch next to them, it's a little easier to hear what they're saying, and they're less likely to say certain things, or when you're sitting there, it's easier for them to say inappropriate things to somebody if staff is 20 feet away in the office. So we don't do any sort of restraint. So I mean, we're a hands-off organization. We don't do physical interventions. And then, so all staff must be trained in a DLR approved behavior management thing. And this is what Whitney and I were talking about yesterday, right response that we train. Like, we train this, and it does have physical restraints, but we don't use them. So, I mean, it's just a tool that says, yes, you have been trained, but our philosophy as an agency is that we don't do physical interventions. I'm trying to get some clarity on that, and I have been for years, around there are certain interventions that are going to be necessary to save a life, and how can we make sure that our policy allows for that without staff feeling scared to intervene because they don't want to lose their job. So we either answer the question like, why did we watch the person get beat to death, or why did we intervene inappropriately when we're a hands-off organization. And I don't even know if I'm supposed to say that as a supervisor, but I would take, if you're going to fire me because I stopped these kids from beating each other up, then that's what I'm going to get fired for. I'm not going to get fired because I watched a kid beat another kid to death. So that's just my thought around that. So, but I want you to do it in a safe way. And if it's not safe, please contact the police or whoever you need to contact in the time of an emergency to contact the police, not whoever, because contact the police if it's at a point where you feel like it's physically unsafe and you can't intervene, then contact the police. I think we only have a couple more pages. Am I required to assess a child's need for immediate medical attention? So yes. So when a child first enters out-of-home care, so this is, generally like their first placement into care. So oftentimes kids that are PC'd or in protective custody, we need to take those kids to the doctor within 5 days of them being in our program. So youth who have been in foster care for years and years and years, and this is just another placement on their road to foster care. We still take them to the doctor because we have some forms and stuff that we want to take to the doctor that tells you, that we can give them aspirin and it's okay, and that they're not taking any other meds, and making sure that they get their basic needs checked to see if they STIs or anxiety or whatever, that is all addressed. So we try to do that within 7 days, but it's not a requirement that we do it within 7 days. It's more of a company, agency practice. But there is a 5-day expectation of kids that are new into care. And this can be even a kid who's in an RHY bed, runaway and homeless youth bed. If he is, it's the first time he's ever been in a placement or a shelter like ours, then we would want to take him to the doctor within the first 5 days. You must also make reasonable attempts to obtain the following health history: allergies, all current prescription medications, all special physical and mental health issues. If a child remains in placement beyond 72 hours, you must contact the child's social worker or their parent to make sure you have the date of the child's last physical and dental exam, a history of immunizations, and clinical and medical diagnosis and treatment. So parents will bring us medications and not necessarily tell us what it's for. I mean, and we can do all the Google searches we want. It might tell us that it's for anxiety or whatever, but that might not be the specific reason that medication, because it might, it might be for anxiety and seizures, and we should really know which one it is for. So it's best if they bring us meds that we kind of ask what they're for. And sometimes the kids will know, they'll be like, oh, I have anxiety, or I suffer from depression. But if it's not known, we should be asking the questions. So we talked about this earlier, what are the requirements for obtaining consent for emergent and routine medical care? So this is, the department is the legal custodian for children and places in care. And so they have the authority to authorize emergent and medical services. So they do give us a sheet of paper that says that we can get them treated. So we often take that to the doctor with us or the hospital with us if a kid goes in for whatever reason, so that they know that. And then they also generally understand that the kid then has state medical insurance, so they kind of know like the billing and the process with that. It's your responsibility to ensure that a child receives the necessary medical attention if injured or harmed. In the event of a life-threatening emergency, you must contact 911 prior to transporting the youth to the medical facility. And generally with this, 911 can generally get to the hospital faster than we can. Even if where they're coming from, they have the ability to blow through lights and those sorts of things that we don't have if we're in our private vehicle. So we generally call 911 and let them transport to the hospital, and then staff or their family member, we have somebody meet them at the hospital once they've gotten there. If staff goes, they take the agency vehicle, and when the youth is released, they put them back in the agency vehicle and they bring them back home. Sometimes the staff will take them and drop them off. Sometimes they'll get dropped off by the ambulance, the parents will meet them there, and then the parents may return them to the facility or decide that they don't want them in the facility anymore, and they'll call us and let us know they ain't coming back. So there's those sorts of things. Anything? I don't think there's anything else about that.
Can I ask one quick
yes.
question?
Yes.
So with the medical examination happening for first-time clients within the first 5 days, what if they don't want that? What if they refuse to see, like, have a medical exam or something? Is that an option, or is it a requirement for them?
It's a requirement, but youth also have like free will, and we can't, put them in handcuffs and take them to the doctor. So I don't think we've had that happen. But if it was to happen, we have a refusal for medical treatment form that we'll go over in medication training. That is not going to happen today. The refusal for medical treatment form, says that, I'm refusing a course of medical treatment, that's being offered by, staff, and I'm refusing to go. So we just have them sign that. And then if they also refuse to sign that, I would just have you and another staff write a note on there saying, we attempted to take the youth to the clinic, they refused to go. We asked them to sign the form, they refused to sign the form, and then have both staff sign it.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
It hasn't happened recently, but there's a possibility it could. So the last thing, this is the last page, I know that, group homes. So what are the required ratios of staff to children in group homes? So you must have at least one direct care staff on site while children are present for every 8 children in your group home. So in our programs, our ratio is 1 to 8. And we try to have more staff on shift than that, but that's the minimum number of staff that we can have. Oh, I am so tired. This is much easier to do on paper, Whitney.
It was a very thorough training, Danny.
Thank you. I just want people to be on the right thing. Because I feel like, I don't know why. Oh, I can't pause it. You have it recorded.
Here, you want me to pause the recording?
Yeah, we need it.
I just want to say that.
Okay. So we're still in progress notes right now. If a client is needing a lot of support during a shift, you can include that in the progress note. So, client did not want to engage in group activity, staff offered options, and client chose to spend some time in his room or chose to take space away from the group. Also, if there's any type of consequence, then that's also helpful to include in the progress notes, so the rest of the staff can be consistent in applying that. If the client is participating in groups or outings, you want to include that information. We talked about that. If there's any major significant incident, like, doing an IR, like the things that we talked about yesterday, you want to include that. If they're going off site, if any referral is made, or definitely also medication administration, as well as any medical emergency, or if the client is feeling sick, right? All of that would be included.
Are you able to, I thought you were.
So just like all other documents that are kept in a client's file, all of these are legal documents. At any time, a client's physical file, including the progress notes, can be subpoenaed in a court of law. And so this means that we want our progress notes to be written in a fair way, right? And in a professional way. All client data is confidential. However, clients do have the right to read their own progress notes. If we're talking about another client in the progress notes, like this client got into a fight with another client, you can use the other client's initials as well in the progress note. And then just like how Danny was talking about yesterday with the stranger test for incident reports, you also want, somebody who is completely unfamiliar with the situation to be able to understand the progress notes for that client. Okay. Just one more note about the progress notes. Those are all just kind of running Word documents. So those are all electronic, and the programs, or each program has a shared drive. So all staff members can access those progress notes, and then you just, update it on your shift. It's also important to remember to log out of the progress notes, because if you accidentally keep it open, then it's going to be locked by you and other people won't be able to make edits. And that becomes confusing because then there becomes copies of things that get made. So just as a best practice, always remember to, close all documents that you've been working on at the end of your shift. Okay. So the logbook is a physical logbook. It's essentially a big notebook. When you're filling out the logbook, it's important to use generally black or blue ink. The reason for that is just because we want to make it really easy to read. When you have things like pink pens or red pens, sometimes that can be challenging to read. And the logbook is a tool that is supposed to be an easy reference for all staff who are coming into the shift, as well as potentially during an audit, our auditors or our monitors, they can also read the logbook. The logbook will also include at the top of the page, so essentially at the very top of the page, it can say day shift, 6-2, and then Whitney and Danny, right? Whoever is working that shift, that's how it's going to be headed at the top. As you start your log for that day, you're going to, so if day shift starts at 8 a.m., you can put 8 a.m., the name of all the clients present in the program. Do you do that, Danny?
Yeah, for the census, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So after you write kind of the basic information, you're going to put clients present, and then you list all the clients who are in the program at the start of that shift. And then essentially, starting at 8 a.m., clients were in dining room finishing breakfast at the start of the shift, and then you're updating the logbook every 20 to 30 minutes at a minimum. You want to log when clients leave the program, and you also want to use initials SX, that means staff. So you're not necessarily saying I took the clients on an outing, right? You can say clients and staff, SX, went on outing to Green Lake Park or something like that. We also can use highlighters, or we often use highlighters to emphasize an entry. So if there's something that you want to draw your peers' attention to, you can highlight that information.
Did I hear correctly that at the beginning of the shift, you're putting the names of all of the participants in the program at that point? The names of the adolescents. So it's their full names that you're putting down in there?
Not their first and last name. So often we write census, like program census as in the margin, and then we just list, all the kids that are present in the program. So I mean,
by first name?
Yeah.
I'm trying to clarify.
And first name, last initial. If we have 2 Jennifers, just, put the last initial,
okay.
So that we know.
Yeah. Great question.
Oh, is that a ding?
Okay. So in the logbook, you want to include if people are coming onto the site, if they're there to fix something, or if they have, you know, during non-COVID, like Danny was saying, we would have the pastor come to Hope Center and give services. So he would be a visitor that would be logged. Also in the programs, there's a visitor and volunteer kind of sign in and sign out. So visitors and volunteers are going to have to be signing themselves in and out, and the logbook is just another place that we keep that information. You never want to white out something in a logbook or like scratch it all the way out to where you can't read it. That's because, again, it's a legal document. And so if you make a mistake, for example, here, like they meant to write Saturday, but they accidentally wrote Sunday. So you just draw one line through the word, or even if you put like a whole sentence that's wrong, you're confused and you write the wrong thing, you can just put a line through it all and then put your initials. And that's a note that, you know, to whoever is reading it, that that information was put in an error. Talking about factual information, you know, you can write appears to be or seemed. If you know exactly how they feel because they've stated that, then you can put that information in quotes. The logbook is generally not as specific though as it is in the kids' individual progress notes. So the kids' individual progress notes are going to have a lot more detail than the logbook.
Oops, I didn't do it. Hold on.
Okay. When youth are present in the program, entries should be completed every 20 minutes. So as long as the youth are there, you're writing in the logbook. If let's say you're planning an outing to Green Lake, then your last entry, let's say at 5 p.m. you're taking them. So 5 p.m. staff and clients exit program for an outing to Green Lake. And then let's say you all get back at 7 p.m. Then, you know, 2 hours have gone by, but the kids were not in the program. So then you would say 7 p.m. staff and clients returned to program. You know, all clients are watching TV in the milieu or whatever it is when they get back. If you have, let's say all the kids are going to Green Lake, but one kid is sick and staying home, or, you know, one kid doesn't want to go or whatever it is, then you would indicate with initials, you know, who went to Green Lake, who stayed behind. And for that one youth who did stay behind, then the entries are going to continue to be every 20 to 30 minutes. So if the kid is sick, you know, you're still doing your room checks on that client every 20 minutes to make sure they're doing okay. Once a client goes to bed, and this is generally applicable for the grave staff, we're doing bed checks every 20 minutes until they fall asleep, or until 2 a.m., whichever one occurs later. So if the client is asleep or appears to be asleep at 2 a.m., then you can switch the room checks to every 30 minutes. But if you do a room check at 2 a.m. and the client is obviously still awake, then you're going to continue to do room checks until every 20 minutes until they fall asleep. And those room checks are always documented in the logbook.
Am I next?
I'm still reading this, hang on.
Okay.
So at the end of the shift, so essentially you're working on the logbook all throughout your shift, right? It's very common to bring the logbook with you, like wherever you are. If you're in the milieu with the kids and you guys are hanging out and doing a game or watching TV, you can bring the logbook with you into the milieu or into the kitchen, and just keep it updated throughout your shift. That way it's a lot more accurate as opposed to trying to remember, you know, what happened 2 hours ago. If you are doing late, you want to avoid late entries as much as possible. Danny, I know you said you're putting the words LE, right? If there's a late entry for you guys. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the shift, let's say on one of the pages, you only use half of it. Do you guys write a shift summary?
Yeah, we do a shift summary.
Yeah, okay. So then you're going to write the words shift summary, and it's going to be kind of a broad overview of what happened during the day. So, you know, shift went smoothly, clients woke up, ate breakfast, watched TV in the milieu, you know, went on an outing. If there's like any major things, you can add it there. But once again, it's not super detailed. It's just the summary. So you write your shift summary. And then if there's still empty space at the bottom of the page, you just draw a line through it That way no one else can add to your shift summary, right? It's a clear indication that everything has been written for that shift. And then at the next shift, right, on the following page, people are going to write, again, the date, the names of the staff, and the shift, and then they're going to do the whole process over again. The logbook can also be a good place to communicate with other shifts. Like, for example, like if our swing staff is there and they leave some client, the kids went to bed, but there's still some clothing in the washer that needs to be moved to the dryer, the logbook is a good place to write that, like reminder, like please move client clothing to dryer. That may be highlighted or something like that. Generally, the staff will like do that in the verbal pass down as well. Like, oh, hey, like these are the pending things, or don't forget about this. But the logbook is just a good way because the shifts can be long, right? And sometimes in pass down information can accidentally be missed. And so it's helpful to have all of that information written down. Okay, so now we're on, I think this is you again, Danny.
This is Sarah. This is why.
Oh, great. Wait, did anyone have any questions about progress notes or logbook? Okay, great.
Right. So we'll move on to client file paperwork. And let's see if I can, how? Did you do that or did I do that?
You did that.
Yes, all right. All right, so there's a few reasons why we need those documents, so we'll go over that. We'll go over the priorities for paperwork, the consent paperwork, intake paperwork, medical documentation, the case manager paperwork duties, ROIs, which are releases of information, miscellaneous client file documents, and exit paperwork. So why do we have all these documents? There's a few various reasons. The first is that we're a licensed facility, so we have to follow the WAC licensing requirements in order to remain open, keep our funding, all of those things. We also need to track our data information so that we can track bed nights in the programs. That's used for funding. It's also used to track and make sure that we're offering the services that we say that we're offering. And if something were to come up legally and we needed to prove that we've given those documents or we've shown youth those things, then we have a way to do that. Guardian and safety information for each client. All of these documents provide information about who their guardian is, the name of their guardian, those kinds of things. We might need to notify them for safety reasons. So it's very important to have all of that. And then data and analysis, and that tells us a lot of different things. Who are we serving? What are the populations we're seeing? Patterns help our data, I think it's learning and impact now, help them track patterns and various things so we can kind of go over what's working and what's not. And then also to be able to debrief things, to be able to figure out were there places that we can make improvements for our youth. So there's 4 top priorities for the paperwork. The client information and quick reference sheet, that provides a physical description of the youth for the police in case of a run. So it's got like height, weight, hair color, kind of a brief description of what they look like. So if that youth runs, that's information we're going to have to be able to give the police if they come and do a run report. It also contains guardian information and basic health information. So it should contain the address, phone number, maybe even an email for the legal guardian. Basic health information. Are they allergic to anything? Do they have specific needs that we need to address right now for medical, dental, any other needs? And then it also, on the back lists some school information, which is really helpful for us to figure out where are they attending school, how do we get them there, what grade are they in, is there a school counselor we need to be aware of, and then it lists another spot for additional contacts. So do they have a therapist, do they have an attorney, all of that stuff will be listed in there. We also need to obtain parental consent and notification, and we'll go over that a little bit more in depth. And then the RHY intake form, it's also called the electronic intake form. It's a little misleading because we use it for all of our bed types. And at the adolescent shelter, we have 3 different bed types. We have HOPE beds, RHY beds, and ASD beds. So that form is actually used for all of those same bed types. That allows for entry into our database system, which is called the YES system, and therefore funding our client beds. We also have the Clarity HMIS client consent, and that's also necessary for that database entry. So consent paperwork, the first contact that we make with the youth's guardian, and it does need to be whoever their legal guardian is, should be within 8 hours of entry. If it's unsuccessful, we need to contact their guardian every 8 hours for the next 72 hours until we actually get consent. And so sometimes we use the word consent interchangeably with actually getting full consent and all of the paperwork filled out from the guardians versus getting their approval for the youth to be in program. And those are 2 different things. For them to have consent, it means that all of the consent paperwork is completely filled out. So there are 5 different consent forms. There is the consent for placement and service authorization. And that is the form that we actually log each of our guardian attempts on. We put the day we called, or sometimes we've emailed if there's not a working number. So whatever we've done, we put that, we put our name, we put the date and the time, and we put the outcome. What happened? Did we get consent at that time? Did they make a meeting to come in and see us? Did they did we leave a voicemail? What happened? The activity consent form is the next form, and that one allows us to actually take them on outings, do things with them. And then the no contact list, that one is used if there's somebody that they don't feel like their child should have contact with. It could be a court order. It could be just that they feel like that's an unsafe person, whatever that may be. Because they are their legal guardian, they are allowed to set that list. And so they can do that in a few various ways. They can leave it open, which means that the youth can contact anyone. They can close it, which means that they can only contact people that they specify, or they can restrict it that says you can contact anybody except these specific people. So those are the various ways they can do that. We can't control what they're doing on their devices. And we can't control who they contact outside of program, but we make the best attempts that we can within the program to abide by that contact list. And then the last one is the education. It's the consent for release of education records, and that allows us to contact the various schools that they're enrolled in to get any records we need. It could be an individualized education plan or 504. It could be just information we need to help them get set up for, online school stuff that they're doing right now. It could be to set up McKinney-Vento transportation so that they have a ride to and from school. There's a lot of variety of reasons why we would need that. Okay, so phone consent versus in-person. So in-person consent, the guardian has come in to sign each form in person with us. Phone consent would be if they aren't able to come in, we can do that over the phone. So we would record their name in the guardian name section, and then underneath we would write consent obtained via phone where the guardian would sign. And what we do with that is we read through the whole form with them on there, and we have to have them affirm that they understand each section. There is a specific spot on the first one, the consent for placement, that has, I believe it's 8, or maybe it's more than that, little sections that they have to initial. And so we go through each one and we have to hear them say, yes, I agree to each of those pieces. We also need to record each guardian attempt again, like we said, every 8 hours. And we do that on that consent for placement and service authorization form. We also do that in the progress notes so that the next shift knows what time it needs to happen for the next one. We do that with verbal pass down. Sometimes we might write it on a communication board. And then we might also put it in the shift summary in the logbook as well.
If there's more than one legal guardian, is one sufficient, or do you have to have both, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if they're living together, one is generally fine. If they share custody, we would probably need to figure out who actually has physical custody, because sometimes there's a parenting plan where one parent can make some decisions, but the other one has actual, like, all the like physical, can make the decisions for, you know, housing and that kind of stuff. So figuring that out, if they want one contacted but not the other, that can sometimes be a red flag, but sometimes it just means that they know that one parent is a little bit more willing to work with us. So we definitely will check in with the parent, just kind of ask some questions, and try and get some more information. If there's a dispute at any point about who the legal guardian is, then we have to start kind of doing some digging and figuring all that out. And then if we have some situation where one guardian says they can stay, the other one says they can't, and they both have equal rights in it, then we would need to kind of figure that out. Likely we would have to go with the one that says that they can't, but we would have to do a little digging on that just to verify. And we have had that happen. We have had youth get consent from one and find out that they're not actually the legal guardian. And then we've had to contact the regular legal guardian as well. So that does come up. It's a good question. Any more questions about consent paperwork before we move on to the rest of the intake stuff?
Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how do we then determine during this initial process that guardian is the actual guardian before we go through that process? Is there a way that we do that, or we just kind of take the word of the person at that point?
Yeah. So unless there's a major red flag, we typically will take their word for it. If something comes up throughout the youth stay that makes us think otherwise, then we'll start to reach out to other service providers. They may have some additional information. We can also call central intake and just kind of try and see. It depends on what worker you get. Some workers will give you that information just pretty easily. Others will tell you, well, we can't release that because of HIPAA. But we do our best to kind of try and figure out if there is a question about whether or not we have legal custody. We absolutely will start going through other routes, trying to figure out who actually has it. We might request a parenting plan or a court order, or we might also talk to central intake and have a worker assigned in order to get a little bit more to the bottom of it. And we actually do have that going on right now. We have a youth whose sister is, for as much as we know, legal guardian, but there is some question. And so right now we do have CPS involved to just kind of get to the bottom of things, try and get some more information around it. Okay, so intake paperwork. So program rules and expectations form. We typically do that with the youth before their guardian leaves, if their guardian is the one that brought them in. Mostly this pertains to state-dependent youth because their social worker should always be bringing them in, and the social worker will be signing consents as we start to go over the program rules. The reason that this is a really big deal to do right away is so that they understand what's being expected in their stay. There may be something that they decide, you know what, I don't really think I want to do this. I want to leave right now. And it's better to have them make that decision, be able to talk through all of that when their social worker is still there than, 10 minutes after they've left and they're not coming back to get this kid tonight. So being able to have that decision, it is a voluntary placement, and we want them to be able to have some power and control over those decisions that they're making in any way that we can give it. So we do have that started right away. The client rights and responsibilities, we typically do that with most of the other intake paperwork. The grievance procedure, the CPS notice, and just letting them know we're mandated reporters. So client rights and responsibilities just kind of goes over what's expected of them, and then also what do they get out of our program? What are their rights? What do they have the right to do in our program? And so we both sign that as we go over it. The grievance tells them if they feel like they've been treated unfairly, or they feel like their services, they're not getting the services that they need, they can file that grievance, and it tells them how to do that. And then, like I said, the CPS just lets them know that we're mandated reporters. And so if they do report abuse to us, we do have to tell them or tell Central Intake about it and make a report. We also have some medical forms that they fill out when they do intake. The medical history form has some information just about their last physical, dental. It's also got information about what are they allergic to and what symptoms might they have with those allergies. Are there any medical concerns they have going on right now that we should know about right away? And then is there anything that's a special dietary need or specific need that they have that we might not know right off the bat. Medication compliance form, this spells out the requirements for medication, lets them know that they can't have medication in their rooms, and how we dispense medication, what we do if they have a prescription that they want discontinued. Kind of goes over all of that information. So we go over that with them, and we both sign that form. Psychotropic medication consent. So psychotropic medication consent is only necessary if they are prescribed a psychotropic medication. However, we have a lot of youth who might get prescribed something during their stay, and so we have all of them sign it when they first come in, and that way we're covered, because it's really hard to track. If you have a youth that came in 30 days ago, they didn't have anything, now all of a sudden they're prescribed risperidone or something like that, and we want to make sure we get that form completed. So having it completed initially is a lot easier, and then we can take it out of their binder and shred it if they don't end up needing it, or we just put a line through it and say that they didn't have any psychotropic medication during their stay. If they are 12, they cannot sign that form. That has to be signed with the consents by their legal guardian, because they need to be 13 in order to make decisions about psychotropic medication. Does anybody have any other questions? Oh, and copy of insurance information. This definitely gets missed quite a bit. So it's really important, if the guardian is still there with you when they first come in, to ask about their insurance information. Sometimes they'll have it and you can just take a copy of their card. Sometimes they won't have it, but at least it puts it on their radar that we're going to be requesting it. Right. So section 6 is client information. So this is their inventory log and policy. And so we have both the inventory and the client belonging policy on the same sheet, which is great for some reasons because it reduces the amount of paperwork, but it can be challenging because you get them to sign the policy saying they understand that we're not responsible for their belongings. And then maybe you forgot to have them do their inventory when they're with you. So trying to get that done, if possible, during intake is great as you're going through their things, because you have to go through their things anyway to make sure that they're not bringing anything in that they can't have. And so sometimes what I'll do is I'll sit down with them and I'll go through their belongings and I'll have them write down what they have as we're going through it. that can be a pretty good way to get them to do the inventory right away. The other option that they could do is they could sign it, and then they could take a copy with them to their room and complete it, the inventory, and bring that copy back and sign it that way. There's a variety of ways you can do it, but if they don't have an inventory, it's really hard for us to say like, oh, that phone that you say is stolen, it's not on your inventory. We can't determine whether this other kid who just showed up with a phone has your phone. So being able to put that kind of stuff on there is really important. If they have a copy of their ID, social security card, birth certificate, school ID, that is really great for their file. So that's another one that gets missed sometimes. Just asking them right off the bat, do you have this? Then we can make a copy of it right then and give it back to them. And then the last section is section 12, the guardian releases and information. So this is the releases of information for the guardian, for maybe clinics. It does say school, McKinney-Vento. We actually don't need that anymore because we're covered under the education request that the guardian signed. And then other service providers. So we have a variety of releases of information that are kind of just standard that we typically use for youth attorneys. If they have a therapist, if the social worker and guardian one, we usually just will have them do one for DCYF, and that covers all of that. So all those various ones. So the medical documentation, going a little bit further into that medical history form we just talked about, we complete that at intake. They do go get a physical exam. Right now they're being done either via like a telehealth type program or via phone. But during that time, they'll get the physical, and then they'll get, if they want, a TB test as well, because tuberculosis can run kind of rampant through various homeless populations when youth are together in small spaces, moving around a lot. We do see outbreaks here and there. At juvenile detention is often a place where youth get exposed. So it's good for them to get one just to see if they've had an exposure, but it's not required. When they get their physical exam, if they're a state youth, we ask that it's a well child check. And the difference with the physical exam and a well child check, the well child check is like the top to bottom whole physical exam, going over all of the same things that you would when you take a kid to their annual exam. So we try and get a note from the doctor saying that they've had one of those two things done for their file to show that documentation, because we have to have it within 5 days of them coming in. Medical standing order, so that just allows them to be able to take over-the-counter medications. Basically, it's the doctor saying that you don't have anything that would interact with any current medications you're taking or with any allergies that you have. That gets completed during that initial clinic visit and within 5 days of entry. The medical compliance form, so that's the one where we just talk about the process, excuse me, the rules and stuff around like medication, how we store it, what we do, how we dispense it, those kinds of things. That's completed during intake. Psychotropic medication consent, we talked about that one already. That's done via intake. Client medical forms, so they're going to get various forms based on which visit they're attending. Their first visit is going to have a few different things, and then they might have other ones like if they go in to be seen in the emergency room, they might have a discharge summary or an aftercare visit in one of the other clinics for whatever ongoing thing they have. It's really important to bring all of that stuff with you to each appointment and then bring it back and get it into their file, just so that we have documentation of medical conditions we've been treating, and all the information about it, so we can pass that on to other staff and make sure that we're handling all of their medical health needs correctly. Insurance information, again, making a copy during intake so that we have it. And then immunization records, there is actually a requirement through the WAC that we need to request those within 3 days of entry. And so we typically do that while we're on the phone with the guardian doing consents. That's the easiest way, and then we just track that we've done that. And it doesn't mean that we absolutely have to have it. Sometimes we can't obtain it, but we have to just document the types of attempts we've made. Schools are really good, though. Usually we can get it through schools if we can't get it through the guardian. And we can also request it at their first physical visit to a clinic as well. We do that a lot. So case manager paperwork duties, the best practice is that the case manager meets with each client within 3 days of entry. Right now, that's a little difficult with the schedules we are doing, but we do our best to get youth meeting with the case manager as soon as possible. With case manager meetings, we go over a lot of their history and figuring out what's going on, what are the absolute big needs that they have right now. Personal history and assessment form, that gets given to them. They can also do that with staff though too. It's got a lot of great information about who is in their life, relationships that they have, health concerns they have, spiritual and cultural needs, other goals they want to work on, that kind of stuff. They will fill that out and they will turn that into us. We need to review that and sign it. So anyone that they turn it into should be reviewing and signing it, just to make sure that if they have put anything around abuse in there, that we have the moment to go ahead and call central intake and make that report. But also because they might put information that's really pertinent to health or to mental health and well-being. They might talk about self-harm in that. And so we want to be able to be aware and know, okay, what does this youth need right away? And are we meeting their safety needs? The service plan, that's basically goal setting. They do sign a basic one at intake with staff, and then when they meet with me or any other case manager, they go over that again in detail to see if they want to make any changes, if there are additional goals that they want to do, any of those kinds of things. And then the case manager is responsible for overall completion of the client file paperwork and data entry as well. Do you guys have any questions so far? Okay, great. So we'll move on to releases of information. So because of HIPAA, we have to be careful of who we're giving information to and when and why. So we have you sign a release of information. And so the first couple of spots say that we can release and receive information from the listed people on that release that we're doing. And every agency that we're working with has their own, has a separate release. So I can't say that we can release information or receive information for Friends of Youth, Nexus, Cocoon House, all together. Each agency has to have their own. If a person without a release of information signed by the client contacts the program, we can't confirm or deny that that client resides in the program or not. So usually we'll just say, I'm sorry, I can't confirm or deny that any client may be here, but I can take a message, and if they happen to stop by, I can give that message to them. So that's usually a way to kind of figure that out. You can obviously ask who they are and then search the file to see. We often do put information in their progress notes too at the very top for common contacts that might call us. Their client information cannot be shared without the signed release, like we said, and they have consent over who they agree to sign releases of information with. Because their legal guardian is their legal guardian, we can always share limited information with them. So client location, daily functioning, safety, and related information like that. We do still have them sign a release of information for their guardian, however. We always include the address and contact information of the person listed on that release of information, along with what types of information can we release. So we may ask for medical records from a doctor, but maybe we wouldn't ask for medical records from their best friend who might call us. So various types of information is initialed off on each release of information specific to who that release is for. And then we have them just sign as many as possible, because you never know who they're gonna have call. You know, if they have a counselor that they haven't been in touch with for a year, still have them sign a release, because they might wanna get back in touch with that person. And it's a lot easier to have that done at intake instead of trying to figure out, okay, now they're at school, they want us to call their counselor, but we can't call them because we don't have a release of information. Now it has to wait for a day or two. So as much as we can get at the beginning is great. And then miscellaneous client file documentation. So there's some stuff that's more like when it's applicable, it's not always going to be a thing at the beginning of their stay. The homeless verification letter, the case manager does that specifically. The attainments, those get printed after the youth is out of program and has exited. Behavior contracts and safety plans, those may be made throughout their stay depending on what's going on, and those will be added into their file. Progress notes, those live on the computer as a living document, and then they are printed after they exit program and are put into their file. We might have some legal and court paperwork, voluntary placement agreements for state dependent youth. Could have like some of their screening information is going to be in there. There might be some additional state stuff. We do request some additional things like their court report and dependency order. Those kinds of things get requested and put in there. Incident reports, if they have any incident reports during their stay, those will go in there. Grievances will also go in if they have any grievances. Any medical visit forms, if they have any proof of identity, ID, birth certificate, social security card, any miscellaneous stuff that comes up. There's always kind of random client things that'll pop up that you'll put in their file. School enrollment paperwork or transcripts, IEPs, 504 plans, really anything that comes from the school is great to have. Passes or visit sheets. So right now they're not taking passes because of the COVID-19 situation, but once they do start taking passes again at some point, we do have a process for requesting time out in the program that's longer than just a walk. So those will go in there to document that we know where they're going. We have signed off on where we're going. Whether that's where they go or not, at least we've done our due diligence, and we're showing that we're tracking all of that information. Miscellaneous employment records. Some of our youth do have jobs, and so having pay stubs, having information about where they work, maybe their W-2s, all of that kind of stuff will go in their file. Their schedules, they do have to provide a written schedule to us if they are working, so that we know when they're expected to be at work, when they're done, all of that. Allowance sheets, they do get allowance every week, so that gets documented as well. And then if they have any referrals to chemical dependency programs, mental health programs, any of that kind of referral stuff will go in there. And correspondence with other service providers. So that's going to be letters or emails. If anybody emails you about a youth, then that needs to be printed and put in their file. So it's really important to keep track of all of that stuff. If you get information about two youth, you still have, in the same email, you still have to print that out, and you just black out the information of the other youth. All right, and then exit paperwork. So a lot of exit paperwork gets completed by the case manager, but there are a few things that get completed by anybody who's in program, the youth counselors or anyone else. So the client aftercare plan, these are goals that they set within about the next 6 months, and how often contact is established, what method of communication. It's so that we can follow up with them and see how they're doing, see if they need any additional services, that kind of stuff. There is a form that they can do these goals with staff, and then they sign it and they put down who we contact. Do we contact them directly? If they don't have a phone, do we contact like their mom or their sister? Who do we get in touch with just to see how they're doing? And then if they decline that, there's a spot for them to write that they declined as well. And our contracts are asking us to offer it. So that is a pretty big piece of exit if you can. If they verbally decline, writing that down as well, just saying the youth verbally declined, also declined to sign the form. We do an exit survey just to see kind of how was your stay? What could we do better? What did you like? What did you not like? That's a really important one to offer to all of the youth as well. Again, if they don't want to do it, that's fine. It is optional, but it does help us to improve our services. And it's important. Client feedback is really important to us to get to know, what do they like? What do they not like? And then there's also a discharge checklist that Danny created that's really great. It tells all of the things that you've done. Have you done each piece? Did you do the aftercare plan? Did you do the exit survey? We need to know where they're going when they leave our program. And so it has a space to put the zip code of where they're leaving to. Who are they leaving with? Is it a legal guardian? Is it social worker? Is it their grandma? Who is it that is exiting them? And where are they going to next? Are they going to a shelter? Are they going into foster care home? Are they going to their sister's house, their mom's house, whatever? That's all information that will be used in the exit paperwork. And so the case manager completes the RHY exit form and uses that information to do it. If they're going to stay with family or friends, finding out, do they anticipate this is going to be a long stay or short stay? So 90 days or less, or 90 days or more, and documenting that as well. And then we also ask that people are taking a copy of the driver's license or badge or some sort of ID of the person that is picking them up, so that we make sure that whoever is picking them up is actually authorized to pick them up if it's not a regular guardian. Anybody have any questions with that? Okay, so to summarize, client information and quick reference sheet, the RHY or electronic intake form, and the HMIS consents are kind of the first things we do immediately. We also do the rules pretty immediately as well. They have the first attempt for guardians needs to be within the first 8 hours, and any attempt after that is within the next 8 hours, every 8 hours, until we get consent within 72 hours. Preferred consent is within 24. And then we also need to be checking the missing clearinghouse and the Washington State Missing Youth website to see, are they on the run? Are they missing from care somewhere? Is there someone looking for them, as well as just making sure that we're not harboring the runaway and all of that. If consent is obtained over the phone, remember that you write in the guardian signature section, consent obtained via phone. It's best practice to have 2 staff witness and sign if possible. We don't always have a shift where there's 2 staff on, or one staff might be on an outing and the other staff is back. But if possible, if there's 2 of you there, just flip it on to speakerphone, and that way you can both witness that happened. And then you can always look at the file layout sheet to see where items should be filed as well. With the medical paperwork, again, 5 days new into care for attending clinic, and within the first week if they're not new. Forms completed and added to the client binder after client visits were going to be the medical standing order, TB test, and physical exam documentation, the clinical medical visit form, or it's also called discharge summary or aftercare summary, and then their immunization records. And then we have all clients fill out the psychotropic medication form just so that we catch everyone just in case. But it's really super important for all youth who are prescribed a psychotropic medication. And then if they are under 13, then a guardian must sign that one. And that's it.
Danny, since we're at 4:30 right now, how do you want to proceed?
I mean, I think so. We have fleet management. I'm not sure what else we have. I know we have
fleet management, facilities request, Sharps policy, on-call expectations.
I mean, I think all those can be done in the program.
Okay.
I know you had your big spiel set up for fleet management and facilities.
Don't worry about it.
I can stay on and record it with you if you'd like me to show them to you. You would like me to show it to them later.
No.
Oh. Okay, I was just trying to be supportive of your planning and your preparation. So, everybody, thank you. I'm going to send out the address to the Hope Center after this call or after this Zoom ends. So you guys will have that. I will also forward the training information that Joss talked about during the staff meeting regarding being able to talk to youth of color, engaging conversations with youth of color, and would encourage you guys to sign up for that if it fits your schedule. It's probably a Zoom training just like we've been doing. And then I can let Gabe know like how far we got. I mean, because the fleet management just kind of talks about the driving policy and stuff that I sent you guys, and is like a walk around of the vehicle and those sorts of things. The facilities requests are just about like if something needs to be repaired, like how do you what's the process for getting that fixed? And basically right now it's emailing me and I try to figure out who I need to talk to get it done. Or a place to like write down minor things that or program suggestions or things that we can try to get. And then the on-call stuff is pretty easy. Like I explained earlier during my long 3 hours of talking, that there should be a sign with my name, the director's name of the area, and the program supervisor's name located somewhere in the program, and it's usually in the staff office. It should be easy to see. At Hope Center, I know they write on the window, like there's a window that shows into the laundry room. They write like who the manager or who the supervisor on call is. And so that number will be just written up there, and that's generally the person that's on call for that week.
We can also email this presentation. We can include the PowerPoints.
Oh yeah, yes, and they wanted us to do that anyway. So yeah, and so we will, and so I will email the PowerPoint when I send out. I know I need to send out the staff schedule again, email the PowerPoint, and there was one other thing I was emailing out, I think, to Rebecca. Was there something else I promised you? Staff schedule. Oh, and the address to the location. So I will send that information out shortly.
Cool.
Okay, any questions from anybody before we go? I appreciate your all patience and tolerance of my spread. Look, I don't have anybody to talk to. My 9-year-old is not speaking to me currently, and it's just me and you guys, so.
The other thing too was the schedule. For some reason, I'm not sure if it was in the collective of attachments in a prior email and I'm just missing it, or
what is the second email include the schedule, I believe, that Danny sent.
Okay. And then for these hours on training, is there somewhere that we need to log that?
No, so
or-
I have them written down. So I have Rebecca, Sophia, Amy, and Kiani for yesterday and today for 4 hours today and 4.5 yesterday. And then I have Rebecca and Sophia for the staff, an hour for the staff meeting today. So I will enter those hours into your timesheets. And then when you go into the program, they'll show you how to like log on and get logged into the computer and stuff, and then set up ADP so you guys can just clock in and out regularly when you're doing other stuff in the program. But if you guys, like I know I sent you all those trainings, e-trainings that you guys can do as far as like, not right response, but the 15 passenger van, defensive driving, CPR and first aid, bloodborne pathogens, and I think there was another one. If you guys do those and you're not in the program and you have extra time to work on them at home, let me know how many hours you guys work on them. And then once I get your certification saying that you completed it, just a copy, you can take a picture of it, do whatever, saying you did it, then I can add those hours to your timesheet as well.
Cool.
Okay. All right. I'm very excited for you guys. I'm looking forward to working with you guys and working with you to develop a program that is, you know, that is ready to be developed and staffed and filled with children or youth, young youth. So.
Yeah, welcome to Youth Care, everyone. It was nice to get to know you on Zoom, and hopefully once things are back to normal, I'll have the chance to see everyone in person.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Bye.